Number 10. The Maker. The Maker is one of the creepiest villains out there, but at the same time, he also seems like one of the saddest as well, at least at the beginning of Ultimate Invasion. And honestly, there are undertones of that throughout, I would say, the Ultimate continuity for him. Who is the Maker? He's the version of Reed Richards who we normally know as Mr. Fantastic, who hails from the reality of Earth 1610, known as the Ultimate or Ultimates reality. What makes him so scary? Perhaps the realization that Reed potentially makes an even more formidable villain than he does a hero. He's like Reed without the moral code. I mean, he is Reed without the moral code. That's literally who he is. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that subscribe. And make sure you have that bell on so you don't miss out on any of our good old nerdy notifications. Number 9. Reavers. Over the years, the Reavers have become scarier and scarier as a group of villains. Initially, the Reavers were members of the Hellfire Club, in a way belonging to the Hellfire Club's elite team of bodyguards, their own personal militia known as the Hellfire Knight. After being taken by Mojo and repurposed, they were turned into cyborgs, who have become more and more horrific as the years have progressed in terms of their appearance. The Reavers would go on to become affiliated with Spiral, Lady Deathstrike, and of course, Donald Pierce. Initially, they just look like eccentric 80s and 90s villains, but in the modern age, they look more like mad science experiments gone wrong, with the weapons that they wield becoming integrated with their own bodies, a part of that. Before, they were some of my favorite comedic relief in terms of comic book villains, and now they're more like nightmare fuel.
Number 8. Zax. The first of a few energy drainers on this list, Zax was formed when a group of villains tried to plant a bomb at a nuclear energy plant. Rather than causing an explosion, this caused the energy in the plant's pylon to gain sentience, incinerating the villains and absorbing their intelligence. Zax then went on a rampage, destroying everything and everyone in its path in order to gain as much intelligence as possible. In his first appearance, Zax destroyed several city blocks in the course of a few minutes, killing untold numbers of people and growing 40 feet tall before being confronted by the Hulk. As if that wasn't scary enough, it has also been revealed that incinerating people and stealing their psionic energy is a physically pleasurable experience for the monster. So Zax isn't just killing to gain strength and power, he's also doing it because it feels good. Number 7. Piecemeal. Piecemeal was once a normal man until he was captured and killed by the Red Skull, who wanted to use his body for an evil experiment. The Red Skull's scientists replaced several of his limbs and extremities, turning him into a terrifying beast. Piecemeal eventually escaped from the Red Skull's island and made his way to the mainland with no memories of his previous life. Piecemeal is obviously a pretty scary looking dude, and his superhuman strength and ability to shoot energy blasts make him a formidable foe, but these are not the things that make him terrifying. As he has no memories of his life, Piecemeal wants to experience as much of the spectrum of human emotion as possible. He does this by triggering the emotions of people and then touching them to absorb their emotions and memories, not stopping until the victim is a worn-out husk. One of the ways he triggers people's emotions is by transforming his face to look like them, putting them into a state of shock. He wanted to absorb the Hulk's rage, but was instead impaled and thrown into Loch Ness. This was thought to be the end of the villainous monster, but when the Hulk searched the loch, he could find no body. Was Piecemeal eaten by the Loch Ness monster? Or is he still wandering the earth, draining victims? Number 6. The Quintronic Man. The Quintronic Man is an exosuit that was developed to be piloted by 5 men trained to act as one. Although originally developed for space exploration, it was instead used to battle the Hulk in Incredible Hulk number 213, even managing to beat the Hulk in that issue. While this isn't particularly scary, what puts the Quintronic Man on this list is its later appearance in Indestructible Hulk number 3. In this story, AIM is attempting to reactivate the Quintronic Man for their own nefarious purposes. In order to accomplish this, they reassemble the original 5 pilots. The only issue? 4 of them are dead. Thankfully for AIM, they are able to use electrochemical technology to ensure that the Quintronic Man still has psionic access to the dead pilot's skills and reflexes and can thus use the dead body's muscle memories to control the robot. In layman's terms, this means that the Hulk is being attacked by a robot full of corpses, which is equal parts scary and disturbing. The Quintronic Man puts up quite a struggle against the Hulk, but it meets its end when Hulk pushes it into a volcano. Number 5. Red Hulk. After the death of his daughter at the hands of the Abomination, longtime Hulk enemy Thunderbolt Ross fell into a deep depression that was only worsened by a perceived lack of purpose after the Hulk was shipped off-world in the Planet Hulk storyline. He was approached by MODOK and the Leader, who convinced him to join their evil super team, the Intelligentsia. During the events of World War Hulk, they managed to siphon energy off of the Hulk and transfer it into Ross, transforming him into the Red Hulk. Red Hulk has all of Ross's smarts as well as his legendary temper, but lacks Hulk's compassion, making him a dangerous and terrifying enemy. With the help of a life model decoy, Ross was able to hide his Red Hulk identity for some time, continuing to work for the government while still going on missions for the Intelligentsia. Number 4. Abomination. Emil Blonsky was a communist spy who was working undercover at the same military base as Bruce Banner, working to sabotage the Gamma experiments so that US forces would not become more advanced than the communists. When a distraught Bruce Banner tried to take his own life with a Gamma machine in his lab, Blonsky was there spying on the professor. When Bruce's self-harm attempt was interrupted and he was taken away, Blonsky was hit by the Gamma radiation instead. Like Banner, Blonsky had a strange genetic variation that caused the gamma rays to transform him into the Abomination. Abomination is able to retain his human intelligence and is actually stronger than the Hulk unless the Hulk reaches a state of total enragement. Unlike Banner, Abomination is thrilled with his new form and regularly goes on rampages, killing entire towns. He considers Hulk his equal, as both are disfigured and alone, but when he learned that Bruce had married his longtime sweetheart Betty Ross, he was enraged at the idea that the Hulk was happier than him. In a move of sociopathic pettiness, when Betty was hospitalized, Blonsky injected his blood into her dialysis machine, killing her with gamma poisoning. Number 3. Half-Life. In an origin not dissimilar to the Hulk's, Tony Masterson was an ordinary college professor until he was exposed to a gamma bomb. This turned Masterson into essentially a living corpse who only comes alive at night. He uses his vampiric powers to drain his victim's life force with his touch. When he touches a gamma-powered character, such as the Hulk, he drains their powers rather than their life force. In his first appearance in Incredible Hulk number 334, he tried to drain the Hulk's powers, hoping that they would give him enough life force to be able to stay alive during the day, but Hulk managed to defeat him, ripping his arms off. To the Hulk's shock, Half-Life was still able to use his arms despite them not being attached. He was later given a titanium battlesuit by the Leader and very nearly destroyed the Jade Giant, but because he overused his powers in doing so, he ended up in a mummified coma. Number 2. The Wendigo. The Wendigo is a figure from indigenous folklore that was first adapted to Marvel Comics in Incredible Hulk number 162. The curse of the Wendigo is something that happens when a person engages in cannibalism in the Canadian wilderness. The curse causes the person to transform into a vicious creature who has an insatiable hunger for human flesh. In its first comics appearance, the Wendigo is a man named Paul Cartier, who goes on a hunting trip with his friends Georges Baptiste and Henri Clouzot. When they are attacked by wolves, the trio are forced to hide in a cave where Henri dies. After 4 days trapped in the cave with no supplies, Georges wakes up and finds Paul eating his friend's remains, inadvertently giving himself the Wendigo curse. Over the years, Wendigo and Hulk clashed several times before Paul's friend Georges managed to transfer the curse to himself, freeing his friend and becoming the second Wendigo. This Wendigo was eventually defeated by Alpha Flight with the help of Wolverine and Nightcrawler. In the years since, several different Wendigos have cropped up in Marvel's Canadian wilderness, each more dangerous than the last. Number 1. Brian Banner. Bruce Banner's father, Brian, is scary because he is all too real. After being abused by his own father, Brian vowed to never have children. Although an accomplished scientist, Brian struggled with alcoholism and anger issues, and when his wife became pregnant and gave birth to Bruce, he became abusive to both of them. This culminated one Christmas when his wife tried to take Bruce and leave, and Brian killed her. Brian was put in a mental institute as a result until he was released 15 years later. During a confrontation between Bruce and Brian at his mother's grave, the two got into a fight, and Bruce accidentally killed his father. Bruce repressed this memory and spent the next several years believing that his father had been killed in a robbery. As if that weren't bad enough, Bruce was haunted by the ghost of his abusive father until he confronted his father in hell during a period of death in Incredible Hulk 460. Brian is the source of most of Bruce's fears, which proved to be most unfortunate when he was resurrected in the Chaos War as a hybrid of the Devil Hulk and the Guilt Hulk, a dangerous and powerful being who fed off of his son's fear. When that failed and Brian died again, he gained the ability to possess gamma mutates using his influence to control several characters, including Jailbait, Sasquatch, the Absorbing Man, and even the Hulk himself. Even before gaining hellish powers, Brian Banner was the villain that both Bruce Banner and the Hulk were most afraid of. The fact that he now has the ability to control some of Hulk's allies and turn them against him makes him all the more frightening.
Number 10. Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn wasn't always a villain, but many things in his life shaped him to become the greedy, insane, and focused, iconic Spider-Man nemesis we know him as today. It all started when Norman was young. Hearing that his parents were having financial issues, he learned at a young age that it was important to look out for number one above all others to ensure his own survival. Number one is Norman Osborn, by the way. His father mistreated him and was known as a failure, and this drove young Norman to strive to do better than his old man, striving for excellence in all things at any cost. When his wife died, it only served to inspire Norman to throw himself into his work even more. He cut out his business partner and began searching for formulas that he could profit off of, ending up discovering and creating the Goblin Serum, which made him smarter and stronger, but at the cost of his sanity. Number 9. Harley Quinn. More of a psychological horror story as well. Harley Quinn ended up losing her sanity and parts of herself in her love of the Joker. It was her love for him that drove her to a life of crime and made her the villain initially that she became. She's now since found a way out of this darkness, dumped the Joker, and even moved more towards becoming a hero, even teaming up with Batman as his newest sidekick. But you can't deny how dark her origins were. In the limited series Harleen, we get a more sexy version of her fall into a life of crime and a fall into her love for the Joker, but even that shows just how much Harley spiraled down into the beautiful and freeing pit of insanity with Mr. J. It also tells us a tale of her being trapped in Arkham Asylum during a breakout with various villains around every corner, and not all of them are friendly towards Dr. Quinzel. In the end, she is forced to choose between the two sides of herself and ends up shattering into complete insanity after killing a security guard who she kind of considered to be her friend, turning away from her saner persona of Dr. Quinzel and fully becoming and embodying Harley Quinn. I just love too that the panel is like literally her shattering. Number 8. Mistress Death. What is one of the greatest fears that most people have? Death, of course. The end of life and the journey into the unknown. I think we're the most afraid of death because we just don't really know what comes next. It is the end of something, which honestly already tends to scare us humans, just the idea of something ending, but it also represents a massive change for us, moving from the realm of the living to the non-living, and whatever comes after that, if anything does at all. Hence, Mistress Death has to be one of the most terrifying villains we have at Marvel Comics. Now, granted, Mistress Death isn't really a straight up villain. She's less of a villain and more of like a concept. Everything must die, and we've also seen what the world would be like without her doing her job. See Marvel's Cancerverse. Yeah, not so pretty. But at the same time, the idea of death still scares us, and although she isn't really taking life maliciously, it's easy to see her as a villain when she preys on the fears of so many in the Marvel multiverse, and the fears of us as readers in the real world too. Number 7. Malice. When it comes to Malice, I think the reason why she scares me so much is my fear of possession. I just think of Malice taking over people's bodies, making heroes perform as they normally would not, and I'm honestly terrified of that. Malice has been a few different people in the comics, and I'm not sure if we've ever really clarified if they were the same entity or not as some of the other Malices that we've had. There is Malice as in Alice McAllister, who can exist as a purely psionic being and has done so in the past, possessing various X-Men members such as Lorna Dane, Psylocke, and even Storm for a time. And there is Malice as in the darker persona of Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, which takes control of the Invisible Woman and who apparently was made manifest during the Psycho Man's attack on New York. Pretty sure these are two separate entities, but I think it's also really interesting that they both kind of like possess people, and they're also both named Malice, so I just decided to include them together because you never know. You never know. Those could be connected at some point. Number 6, Dormammu. When it comes to ghoulies that exist less in the physical world and more in other dimensions, Dormammu is one of the folks who really reigns supreme. Why is Dormammu one of the most horrifying villains Marvel has to offer? Probably because he's just so darn powerful. Also, we don't call him the Dread Dormammu, the Dread Lord Dormammu, for nothing. He rules the dark dimension, which he conquered, and he isn't afraid to mess you up in honestly really terrible ways. I feel like being killed by Dormammu or his forces would actually be a mercy, considering all the terrible ways I've seen him torment his foes, both in the comics and honestly, outside of them as well. Number 5, Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova just creeps me out, even just to look at her. Often the way she is drawn is what disturbs me the most, but at the same time, she is drawn in a way that makes sense when you consider just how terrifying she is from a power set standpoint and in regards to how twisted her mind is. I feel like we draw her like how she is on the inside. She's like really creepy on the outside, and it's representing what she's got going inside, you know what I mean? Which is really creepy and really gross. Cassandra Nova doesn't often think twice when it comes to pulling off unspeakable acts of horror. She will turn you inside out if she feels she needs to, or simply just if she wants to. And honestly, she can do that. At least from a psionic standpoint, and maybe even from a physical standpoint too. There's a few things that have happened, not quite sure what happened with her, but I was creepy and I don't want it to happen to me, I'll tell you that much. Cassandra Nova is one of the most powerful telepaths and psionic characters we have in Marvel Comics, and she just so happens to be a villain, usually, who until recently didn't even possess a sense of empathy. So, this has led her to slaughter millions without even batting an eye. In fact, she's probably less likely to blink and more likely to stare intently while she does this, as she laughs maniacally afterward. Number 4, Galactus. Have you seen Galactus? I don't think I need to justify why he's so scary. So instead, I'm just gonna talk a bit about the time that he took on Dazzler as one of his heralds. This was also a pretty scary time for me as a reader, because during that whole issue, during that whole story, I was wondering if Dazzler would ever get to go back home to Earth to continue to pursue her career as a singer. Seriously, when Dazzler goes on these wacky adventures in the comics, I'm always left worrying about if she's missing singing gigs back home. Like, I'm like, is there a concert going on right now? Like, will she ever recover her career? No, but in all seriousness, Galactus is scary not just because he is gigantic, though honestly there is also that pretty terrifying, especially scary for those who have megalophobia, a fear of gigantic things. He's also scary because in many ways he is inevitable. Although I believe Galactus is still currently deceased in the comics, it has been implied and stated on multiple occasions in the past that his existence is necessary for the cosmos to be in balance and continue on forward, implying that even when he's gone, we have to deal with the fear of what might happen to the universe and even perhaps the multiverse in his absence, which is now. Number 3, Tarn the Uncaring. Just thinking about Tarn sends shivers down my spine. Tarn is or was one of the Iraqi mutants. He was kinda like the Araco version of Krakoa's Mr. Sinister, except that Tarn is an Omega level mutant who also has magic-based powers as well. Tarn's powers are mainly psionic in nature, granting him the ability to read minds while also causing immense pain to his target. Not only is he telepathic, but he's also an immensely powerful telekinetic as well. Like Mr. Sinister, he is obsessed with evolution and genes, and is capable of altering the genetic makeup of other mutants, even taking their powers away or simply malforming them to the point that they can no longer function. The Locust Vile are what Tarn calls his loyal servants, who see him basically as a god. These Iraqi mutants are Tarn's experiments. While most don't survive his experimentation process, the ones who do worship him as their god and join his Locust Vile. Tarn also has the ability to teleport too, so he could just like pop up beside you and then literally turn you into a pile of painful goo. Pretty scary stuff. Number 2, Null. Null is basically the biggest, baddest symbiote around. Yeah, you thought Venom was scary? You thought Carnage was scary? Well, I mean, you're right. Both of those symbiotic characters are pretty scary. But without Null, neither would even exist, so think about that. Null is the god of symbiotes and also wields a symbiotic army complete with symbiotic dragons as well. I mean, yeah. Number 1, the Many-Angled Ones, aka Marvel's version of the Elder Gods, or at least one of their versions, I would say. What could be scarier in any reality, honestly? Yep, Marvel also has their own elder gods who have been known sometimes as the many-angled ones. What do the many-angled ones get up to? Well, when they invade the reality known as Earth 10011, they warp it into something horrifically twisted. After they have influenced and invaded this reality successfully, death is eliminated and life runs rampant and unchecked, with many prominent figures in this reality pledging themselves to the many-angled ones. And if you think that eliminating death would be a good thing, just check out this universe. We'd come to know this reality as the Cancerverse. For a while, the many-angled ones and the Cancerverse actually threatened the entire multiverse, attempting at first to invade Earth 616, which is our main comic book continuity. Fortunately, they did not succeed in their attempt. But if they had, that should be like a what if issue. What if they did that? Does that exist? If it exists, let me know what issue it is so I can look it up and read it.
Number 10. Legion. Legion, aka David Haller, is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller. He first debuted back in 1985 in New Mutants number 25. He is an extremely powerful mutant. Legion has a whole host of abilities, too many to name almost. Chief amongst them, telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, reality warping, and so much more. The only thing, David's not really fully in control of his powers. An Omega level mutant, when his powers first manifested, it was during a terrorist situation, and he actually ended up absorbing the mind of the lead terrorist, Jamal Tarami, which led to his mind splintering and him developing multiple personalities, each of whom controlled a different aspect of his powers. Legion started off as a villain of the X-Men, as he was quickly possessed by the Shadow King, as he was rendered catatonic shortly after his first true manifestation of power. David is also responsible for the Age of Apocalypse timeline, when he went back in time attempting to kill Magneto but killed his father instead, creating that horrifying branch of reality. Part of what made Legion so dangerous was his insanity and unpredictability as a result. However, over the years, David has metamorphosized into somewhat of a hero and has gained more control over his powers, partially through training and partially through tech. However, with a character like Legion, there's always the potential that his grip on his personalities could slip, and he could find himself a menace to the X-Men and the world once more. Also, watch Legion on FX, it's great. Number 9. Danger. Danger is the manifestation and personification of the Danger Room. Now, even if one is only casually acquainted with the X-Men, they most likely know of the Danger Room, the training space that pits the X-Men against all kinds of, well, dangerous obstacles to hone their skills. However, what they may not be aware of is this plot. Due to lots of backstory, Xavier found himself updating the Danger Room with Shi'ar tech. However, as he did, it posed him a question. Where am I? This led Charles to realize the room was sentient. However, he also needed a space for the X-Men to train, so he decided the best thing to do was cover it up and tell no one. The Danger Room was then utilized and destroyed when the mansion was attacked, the various times that's happened. And after one such time, Danger began to seize control of the other machines in an attempt to escape and forge a body. First, Danger coaxed a student to suicide, then managed to build a female body, take on and defeat the X-Men in her quest to kill her father, Xavier. Danger spent years seeking revenge, building new bodies or possessing others, like the Omega Sentinel. She was made all the more dangerous by her intimate knowledge of the team's weaknesses and fighting styles. However, ultimately this character became an ally to the X-Men. Sometimes you just gotta get over all that dark stuff Xavier does when writers want to introduce conflict into the story. That's how it goes. No matter how scary you are, turn good, you get bumped down the list.
At number 8 is the Joker and the Violator. Okay, a Carnage and Joker crossover was cool and all, but how about the Joker working with a literal demon clown from Spawn, if you haven't guessed. Violator, an immortal servant of Satan with inhuman strength and fire-breathing abilities, now allies himself with the Joker in a multiverse-shaking partnership. Batman and Spawn, facing the Court of Owls, reluctantly seek Joker's help, only to discover that they've fallen into a trap orchestrated by the Joker and the Violator. The history of the Joker's unholy alliance suggests likely a monstrous transformation later down the road, but betrayal could also be on the horizon. As the two most feared clowns in comics unite, the questions arise about Joker's transformation under the Violator's influence and his ultimate strategy against such a potent source of evil.
Number 7. Galactus. Another villain that has been off limits to the MCU for quite some time thanks to his ties to the Fantastic Four, which has made so many fans around the world fear they would never see him on the big screen. Galactus is the sole survivor of the 6th incarnation of the multiverse. Originally, Galactus was a humanoid named Galan, born in the previous incarnation of Earth 616 on the planet Ta, a paradise-like world whose civilization is said to have been the most advanced of any known universes at the time. However, the 6th Infinity and all its universes were in their final stages of collapse due to the multiversal renewal cycle, being consumed by the abstract entity known as the Black Winter. Fast forward a bit to him becoming a cosmic entity, Galactus possesses almost limitless cosmic power that gives him a vast array of powers that would take me forever to list off for you guys. It is actually ridiculous. With his insatiable hunger for energy and his heralds of Galactus by his side, the almighty being is an almost unstoppable force capable of pretty much anything. Like, seriously, he's not called the Devourer of Worlds and the God of Oblivion for nothing. Do I really need to explain why Galactus probably won't appear in the MCU? I mean, at least anytime soon. The dude eats planets, and as it stands right now, there aren't many heroes in the MCU that can help take down such a big threat. It would be super cool, and I would honestly freak if I ever saw him in a movie one day, but it is so unlikely right now just due to his sheer power and presence. Check out Galactus for yourself in his first appearance in 1966's Fantastic Four number 48. Number 6. Mojo. Just looking at this guy gives me shivers up and down my spine. Mojo is a part of an alien race from a planet known as Mojo World that resides in a pocket dimension known as the Mojoverse. He is a powerful sorcerer whose full power is unknown, and outside of his homeworld of Mojo World, Mojo possesses the ability to create anti-life energy fields that kills any natural organism. He can project concussive blasts, and he can even increase his own power through television ratings. Mojo has been seen manipulating so many characters in the Marvel Comics, including Rachel Summers, who he got to work for him for a while, but once she broke free, he took matters into his own hands and decided to create his own versions of the X-Men to serve under him, and thus the X-Babies were born. Fast forward past a ton of attempts to get his ratings up so he could increase his power, we see a desperate Mojo launch an all-out attack on New York City that separated the X-Men and sent them into intricate recreations of key periods in their lives. Now, I doubt Mojo will make it to the big screen anytime soon because, well, I mean, look at him, I can only imagine how grotesque he would look, but also because of his methods. Mojo is so self-absorbed and wants nothing more than to be powerful and liked, which for him kind of go hand in hand. So he'll do anything and everything and get rid of anyone who stands in his way. Check out Mojo for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1985's Longshot number 3, and see if you agree with why I doubt we'll ever see him in the MCU. Number 5. Dracula. A lot of you are probably looking at your screen right now like, Jack, are you sure you know what you're talking about? Dracula has played a pretty decent role in a lot of Batman stories, but this is Marvel. Well, you might be surprised to find out that Dracula has been a pretty prominent figure in the Marvel Universe for quite some time. Like most iterations, Vlad Dracula is the supreme ruler and the world's most powerful vampire. Driven by lust for power, companionship, and blood, his centuries of undead existence have brought him into a conflict with vampire hunters, other immortals, and, more recently, superpowered heroes. Born in 1430, Dracula didn't become the vampiric overlord until 1459, after he was beaten in battle by the Turkish warlord Tarak, and was taken to Egypt to be healed. However, it was revealed that he actually turned into a vampire. With newfound vampire powers such as superhuman strength, speed, and agility, a regenerative healing factor, hypnotism, and weather manipulation, Dracula wreaked havoc for centuries with few that could oppose him. Fast forward many years to modern times, and we see Dracula go up against the likes of Blade, Johnny Storm, Mephisto, Thor, and even tried twice to make Storm a vampire so she could become his bride. I can't imagine that Disney will ever give the green light for this character because a blood-sucking, all-powerful vampiric villain doesn't really fit with Disney's style. Not to mention that they don't really like to make R-rated movies, and that is the only way this character would work. Appearing for the first time all the way back in 1951, Suspense number 7, why not familiarize yourself with Dracula just a bit more? Number 4. Shadow King. Had to include the Shadow King on this list because he wasn't on the last one and he is too good, or I guess bad, to leave out. He is allegedly a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of the human consciousness that came to be after the first ever nightmare. Operating through Amal Farouk, who acts as his human vessel, the Shadow King is stated to be a true Omega telepath, making him the most powerful telepath on Earth besides Charles Xavier, as he has been shown to overtake some of the most strong-willed characters like Black Panther and Genta without them even being aware of it. Shadow King was actually the one responsible for the Psy War, when he tricked Psylocke into causing a massive wave of energy that destructed psionic powers across the world. However, he ended up stretching himself a little bit too thin, attempting to link with all the minds on Earth, and was defeated by Psylocke in her new Shadow astral form. This wasn't actually the end for him though, as he was around well after Charles Xavier's death. He even possessed his body for a while. Shadow King has appeared over many Earths in the Marvel Universe, taking a different evil form each time, such as on Earth 6141, where he merged with Professor X, becoming Shadow X, or on Earth 1298, where he also took over Charles Xavier and became Onslaught. I can't imagine Marvel ever putting the Shadow King on the big screen because he is far too big a threat. It seems impossible to actually get rid of him without another being whose powers are on par with him, which is actually what happened in the comics when Professor X and Psylocke teamed up. Check out this multi-universal being for yourself, starting with their first appearance in 1979's X-Men number 117. Number 3. The Brood. The insect-like alien race that travels through space with the goal of finding hosts to infest with their spawn. Yuck. Brood societies work similar to how an average bug colony works, with them living in clans or swarms that serve under the Empress brood. They're a truly savage race that not only enjoy the suffering that they cause others, they also revel in the terror that their infections cause their hosts. They don't technically have any powers, but they are incredibly resistant thanks to their exoskeletons, they have tentacles that are capable of long-range attacks, and they use their razor-sharp teeth and stingers in close combat to deliver either paralyzing or fatal poison. The Brood have been seen on Earth many times throughout Marvel history, going up against the likes of Carol Danvers, Wolverine, Fang, and a large number of the X-Men as well. Sometime after their initial appearance on Earth, a mixed team of X-Men and the Fantastic Four discovered that the Brood Queen and her squadron were leading an attack on Earth, with the first of the bunch arriving in New York City, but thankfully they were stopped rather quickly thanks to a Cerebro-enhanced Emma Frost. They have been seen around since, but I'll let you discover what happened for yourself. Now, I really can't see Marvel bringing this alien race to the MCU as they are anytime soon. Maybe if they weren't partnered with Disney they would be willing, but I can't imagine their parent company would be cool with a bunch of malicious insect-like creatures getting people pregnant Predator style. Check out the Brood's first appearance for yourself in 1982's X-Men number 155. Number 2, Demogoblin. Jason McIndale Jr. had enough of losing against Spider-Man and the Green Goblins, so in their quest for the power that he craved, he ended up following a bunch of demons back to their lair to confront their Dark Lord. Impressed with his efforts and will, the Demon Lord bestowed upon him superhuman abilities through a demonic possession. However, the demon proved to be incompatible and ended up ripping away from his human host and began living separately as the Demogoblin. Determined to destroy all sinners and redeem himself, the Demogoblin went up against the likes of Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Venom, and even Jacob McIndale Jr. because they were the only ones willing to stand in his way. After the Demogoblin's initial death from a church pillar crushing him, he was resurrected by Carnage using Shriek's body as a new vessel, and dubbed himself the Demogoblin now. Alongside her new BF Carnage, she traveled around with Manwolf to hunt down Misty Knight, and she would have killed Misty Knight if it weren't for Manwolf intervening. In a more recent storyline that takes place after Dark Carnage's death, Demogoblin started calling herself Saint D and basically started her own religion. Considering that Carnage is too scary for the MCU to bring in and that they play such a large role in the Demogoblin story, it makes sense that this character wouldn't be introduced anytime soon. Not to mention that they are totally fine with killing and do whatever they think is necessary. Take a look at this terrifying creature for yourself in their first appearance as the Hobgoblin in 1989's The Spectacular Spider-Man number 147, or feel free to skip ahead to their time as the Demogoblin in 2019's Absolute Carnage Lethal Protectors number 1. Number 1, Null the Symbiote God. Once an ancient malevolent deity whose existence predates the universe itself, and was originally content to just drift through the endless abyss that existed before time itself. When the Celestials started creating the universe, Null was awakened by the light of creation and was pretty pissed because his kingdom of darkness was pretty much ruined. After killing one of the Celestials, he was cast back into the void once again, and then he created a symbiotic suit of armor out of the darkness he commanded and started his journey across the universe with the goal of getting rid of the other gods for good. The only weakness that Null has is against the light, which refers to the various powers that are wielded by the cosmic entities. Null is the one responsible for the creation of these symbiotes that we're all familiar with, you know, the ones that make up Venom and Carnage. He's the reason we have two of the most terrifying villains in the Marvel Universe, and that alone makes me want to go nowhere near him. Not to mention, he's the one who gave Gore the God Butcher All Black the Necro Sword. Historically, we've seen Null go up against Silver Surfer and so many gods, coming out on top every time, and then in modern times we have seen him go up against symbiote users like Venom and Spider-Man. I can't imagine we'll get to see Null in the MCU for a couple of reasons, the biggest being that Venom isn't in the MCU, but that's not my whole argument, don't worry. Null is a literal god capable of pretty much anything that he sets his mind to, and he is powerful enough to create symbiotes and beings that can overpower any of the heroes that we've seen both on and off of the big screen. He's too much of a threat right now, but that doesn't mean that I'm not hoping he'll show up one day. Trust me, I really want him to be there. For now, read all about the symbiote god for yourself, starting with their first appearance in 2018's Venom Volume 4, number 3.
Coming in at number 10 today is Lord Mar-Vell. Mar-Vell of the Kree was Marvel Comics' original Captain Marvel, and he was also the first Marvel superhero to permanently pass away when he succumbed to cancer in 1982's The Death of Captain Marvel. The character has reappeared as visions or in flashbacks and obviously in alternate realities, but the one we will focus on today is Mar-Vell of the Cancerverse. It's just a really cool and creative idea. Basically, on his infamous deathbed, the many angled ones contact and corrupt the dying Mar-Vell, granting him new powers which he used to transmute the other heroes, and with Mar-Vell as their lord, they took down the Avatar of Death itself, which in turn completely destroyed Death, allowing the many angled ones to invade their reality.
Number 9. Ultron. Ultron was created by writer Roy Thomas and artist John Buscema and made his first appearance in Avengers issue number 54 back in 1968. He's an advanced AI with a highly intelligent and malevolent personality, initially created by Dr. Henry Pym, you know, the original Ant-Man. As a peacekeeping robot, Ultron eventually gained sentience and became obsessed with the idea of eliminating humanity, viewing it as the root cause of conflict and suffering in the entire world. He possesses superhuman strength, an incredibly high level of intelligence, durability, and the ability to upgrade and improve himself, making him a very scary villain by my view of things. As an artificial intelligence, Ultron has the ability to control and manipulate advanced technology, and often creates armies of robotic drones called Ultron Sentries to carry out his plans, with his primary goal being to replace humanity with an entire race of robotic beings he calls Ultronics. Now, unlike many villains who have, human motivations or emotions, Ultron's cold, calculating nature, devoid of human empathy or conscience, makes him particularly chilling. Once again, he views humans as inherently flawed and disposable. Outside of just the comics, the possibility of a real-life Ultron raises existential questions about the potential dangers of creating advanced AI and the consequences of unchecked technological progress, which is something that terrifies me on a regular basis. Overall, Ultron's combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, technological prowess, and his lack of human qualities contributes to his reputation as a genuinely scary and memorable villain in the Marvel Universe.
Number 8. The Void. Similar to Lord Mar-Vell, the Void is essentially taking the strongest and brightest character and creating a villain that is a sick and twisted version of that. A large part of what makes the Sentry so much more interesting is that while he is essentially like a god-like superhero who inspired all the other heroes, he also has a dark persona called the Void. The Void went on a rampage that took the lives of around 1 million people and almost destroyed Manhattan itself, and so the Sentry made the decision, with other heroes like Reed Richards and Doctor Strange, to cause the entire world to forget about the Sentry himself. Now, in New Avengers from 2004 and 2005, the Sentry comes back to the world, and through a series of events, the Void also returns. Full rosters of the Avengers, X-Men, and the Fantastic Four all went to take on the Void, and they couldn't do a damn thing. Only the Sentry himself could really subdue the Void, and it, in classic supervillain fashion, vowed to just come back. And it totally did. In this siege event, Norman Osborn decided to attack Asgard, and he used the Sentry to do this. The problem is, the Sentry ended up unleashing the Void, and it totally obliterated Asgard completely, taking out Loki in the process. This did actually branch off into a what-if story where the Void was never stopped and destroyed every superhero on Earth, and then went off into the universe to basically do the same thing everywhere else.
Number 7. Kull Borson. Born the older brother of Odin, Kull Borson, aka Serpent, is the god of fear in the Asgardian world. He possesses all the conventional attributes of an Asgardian god. However, as the son of war, many of these attributes are significantly better than those possessed by the majority of his race. He possesses enough superhuman strength to shatter Captain America's shield with his bare hands, has the ability to manipulate magic as he's able to teletransport, revive the dead, and transform himself into a giant serpent. And as the god of fear, he could consume the fear of other people to empower himself, making him stronger and even younger in the process. During the Fear Itself storyline, Kull created and gathered his worthy in order to spread chaos across the entire world. This group being made up of Juggernaut as Kurth, Breaker of Stone, Hulk as Null, Breaker of Worlds, Atuma as Nurkod, Breaker of Oceans, Titania as Skirn, Breaker of Men, Grey Gargoyle as Mok, Breaker of Faith, Absorbing Man as Greythok, Breaker of Wills, and Thing as Angrier, Breaker of Souls. Thor was eventually able to kill him in the storyline after some intense battles, but not without losing his own life in the process. Obviously though, both characters do come back to life just a little bit later on. However, Kull meets his permanent end in 2019's Thor Volume 5 number 13. Want to know what led up to that point? Well, check out this whole story for yourself, starting with 2011's Fear Itself, number 1. Number 6. Cassandra Nova. This powerful telepath is certainly not well known among general audiences and has actually never been introduced in any of the movies whatsoever. Cassandra Nova is essentially a member of a parasitic race of psychic beings and attaches herself to Charles Xavier while he's still in the womb. She absorbed the darkest parts of his mind and basically became Charles' twin sister. Though the doctors pronounced her stillborn, Cassandra in fact survived and spent the next few decades as a growing mass of cells in a sewer wall, building a new body for herself and planning her revenge on her brother. Since she copied the DNA of Charles, Charles, this means that she is able to access the full spectrum of his powers, making her one of, if not the strongest telepath, because this means she has all the powers of Charles Xavier, meaning the ones that he has had and the ones that he might receive in the future as a result of any latent mutations. Overall, she is a dangerous enemy of the X-Men, having made an army of Sentinels murder over 16 million mutants on the island of Genosha, and that by itself is a reason she is on this list today. Check her out for yourself in 2001's New X-Men number 144, and let me know your thoughts on her in the comments below. Number 5. Vox. Maximus Boltagon, aka Vox, is an inhuman and son to two of the top geneticists at Datillon. Subjected to the DNA-altering Terrigen Mist when he was an infant, Maximus peculiarly showed no outward sign of any mutagenic change. Although as he matured, he hid his developing psionic powers from the community, but was less successful in disguising his antisocial tendencies. His mental powers granted by the mutagenic effects of the Terrigen Mist give him the ability to numb, override, and even get rid of a person's mind. He has the ability to induce short-term amnesia in others and the ability to exchange his consciousness with another person as well. He does seem to have a limited range though, but it is made up through variability, as he's only able to affect minds in a certain radius and only create one effect at a time. His influence generally functions while Maximus concentrates, but he has been known to leave long buried influences in his subjects as well, which he can trigger by voice command, causing a subject to carry out embedded commands, forget something, or even remember something. In the recent Death of the Inhuman storyline, Maximus is at New Arctillon when the Kree begin their campaign to get the Inhumans to join them or die. The superhuman Vox and the Kree with him are on New Arctillon and begin murdering every Inhuman they come across, old or new. Armed with all the Inhumans' abilities and no humanity whatsoever, Vox easily cuts his prey down with his powers or with his literal energy scythe. Even Maximus cannot defeat Vox as he quickly loses an arm for even making the attempt to try and do so. It was later revealed that the Kree took his body and placed it in a Vox costume where he was brainwashed to serve the Kree. When Beta Ray Bill took down Vox during his confrontation with Black Bolt, it broke the brainwashing on Maximus as something on Vox's costume teleported her way while also killing Maximus in the process. Number 4. Mad Jim Jaspers. Mentioned briefly at the beginning of our list when I was talking about the Fury, Mad Jim Jaspers is not a super well-known villain, but just because they're not well-known doesn't mean that they're not scary. He has a truly terrifying power, which is the ability to shift and twist reality however he sees fit, making him without a doubt one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, having powers beyond the cosmic entities. Couple that with the fact that he's, well, mad, and you get something out of a David Lynch nightmare that you do not want to mess with. Jaspers regularly twists the world into the nightmare hellscape he believes reality to be, and this, as you can imagine, leads to some imaginative and horrifying scenarios. According to Merlin, the 616 Jaspers is just way too powerful, stating this version of Jaspers is too powerful, too dangerous. His 238 counterpart could at least be halted even if it meant destroying his entire continuum. This one, however, is not so easily containable, and if he can't be defeated, then the Omniverse shall fall into chaos and a new hostile god shall play dice with the matter. Now, if you want to know more about the character, then check him out in his first appearance in 1983's Daredevil, number 9. Number 3. Mr. Sinister. Nathaniel Essex is the supervillain commonly associated with the X-Men, known as Mr. Sinister. He is an incredibly ruthless and sadistic man who has no problems doing whatever he deems necessary to get what he wants, including, you know, mass murder. Thanks to having his genetics altered by Apocalypse, he was transformed from a regular old human into a superhuman capable of some ridiculous things like shapeshifting, telepathy, telekinesis, concussive blasts, and can't forget that he also has super strength, speed, stamina, durability, and reflexes. Sinister is also a scientific genius with expertise in the field of biology, genetics, cloning, physics, and engineering. The character is a master manipulator and planner with decades of genetic research at his command. He goes to great lengths to preserve his powers and personality through elaborate technological means, such as conditioning certain children to be his quote-unquote host in the event of his future death. Over the course of his time in comics, we have seen him go up against the likes of so many heroes and come out relatively unscathed, and that is why he is so high up on our list today. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1987's Uncanny X-Men number 221. Number 2. Chaos King. Amatsu Mikabashi is none other than the Chaos King, the god of evil, chaos, and the stars to the followers of the Shinto religion in Japan. He possessed the conventional abilities of one of the kami, the order of Japanese deities, such as superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, endurance, and recuperative abilities, as well as high ability to wield some form of potent Japanese magic, a brand of sorcery that seems especially effective against the Olympian deities. His physical strength, at least in his main incarnation, is considerably less to that of like Zeus or Izanagi, and is roughly equal to that of of an average kami, but Mikabashi can project energy on a scale at least rivaling that of Zeus and Izanagi as well. Like the Asgardians, the Japanese gods are extremely long-lived but not truly immortal like the Olympians, as they tend to age at an extremely low rate upon reaching adulthood, and are 3 times denser than normal human beings. During the events of the Chaos War, we catch a glimpse of Chaos King teamed up with Necra and none other than the Grim Reaper and Abomination to fight against the other gods. He even goes as far as unleashing Carrion Crow, Eater of the Dead, to antagonize the revived X-Men members. All in all, he is brutal in terms of methods and isn't too easy on the eyes either, so check him out for yourself, starting with 2006's Thor Blood Oath number 6. And number 1, the first firmament. At the very beginning of it all, there was only one universe, the first firmament. For a long time, the first firmament was the sole being in creation until its loneliness became unbearable and it decided to create the first life in creation to give itself companions as well as servants, which it eventually came to regret. It created 2 specific types. Black servants dutifully obeyed and worshipped their creator, and then the multicolored ones had completely different values and desires, as they wanted a dynamic, diverse, and continually evolving reality, where beings lived, learned, reproduced, aged, and died in order to slowly improve themselves through evolution. Unfortunately for them, when the creations argued with their creator, they were destroyed completely. Now, one can only imagine what might happen if an entire universe were to turn evil, but this is the answer to that question, since the first firmament became the evil that many people worry about. Just imagine an evil sentient galaxy that could destroy pretty much anything with just a gesture. Absolutely terrifying and way too much for the MCU. Check it out for yourself in its first full appearance in 2017's Ultimates 2, Volume 2, number 5.
At number 10 is the obvious Venom. Born from the unholy union of an alien symbiote and the embittered reporter Eddie Brock, this malevolent force emerged as an embodiment of Peter Parker's absolute worst fears. In the comics, Venom's sinister plot unfurled in the shadowy corners of New York City as he relentlessly pursued a vendetta against our friendly neighborhood hero. Armed with intimate knowledge of Peter's life, Venom's malevolence reached chilling heights. He would haunt Aunt May's doorstep, casting an eerie shadow over her once safe haven, and sent shivers down Mary Jane's spine in the very home she shared with the web-slinger. Now, while Venom recently has undergone a reluctant transformation into an anti-hero, his origins continue to haunt Spider-Man's psyche, proving even that in the world of comics, nightmares can endure. At number 9 is Morbius the Living Vampire. Introduced in 1971 with The Amazing Spider-Man 101, Morbius is no ordinary vampire. He's a scientist turned blood-sucking bad boy due to a failed experiment which aimed to extend his life by curing his rare red bodily fluid disease. This tragic transformation adds depth to his character, making him both terrifying and sympathetic. And fun fact, Morbius actually appears during that same story arc that had Spider-Man grow 2 extra pairs of arms. Yup, the 6-arm saga, which is terrifying in itself, saw Spider-Man accidentally give himself extra limbs after trying to get rid of his powers, because that flows logically, but he only managed to cure himself thanks to an enzyme in the vampire. Anyways, Morbius's blend of science and horror taps into our fear of losing control over our humanity. Battles with Spider-Man challenge not just the hero's physical abilities, but also his moral compass. This complex antagonist pushes us to ponder the boundaries of good and evil. And if you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is the Demogoblin. One can't help but shudder at the sinister transformation of the Hobgoblin into the Demogoblin. I mean, the Hobgoblin was already scary enough, just jeez. This haunting tale unfolds when the Hobgoblin, desperate for the power to vanquish the Wallcrawler once and for all, entertains a diabolical bargain with Nazareth, a demon of malevolent stature. But rather than directly claiming his soul, Nazareth opts for an unholy possession, forever intertwining the Hobgoblin with this demonic entity. Within the Hobgoblin's shell, an otherworldly struggle ensues, leading to the expulsion of the infernal force. Yet, instead of retreating to the abyss, the vanquished demon materializes as this ghastly Demogoblin. Driven by an inexplicable yearning for redemption, the Demogoblin embarks on a ghastly crusade targeting sinners of all kinds, from ruthless unalivers to mere fibbers, as it seeks to carve its way back to the celestial realm. This spine-tingling saga showcases the chilling depths Marvel Comics can plunge into in pursuit of the scariest Spider-Man villains.
Number 7, Thomas Wayne Batman. Other versions of Batman always have the potential to be a scary thought for our Batman, or anyone, really. But when that version of Batman is Bruce Wayne's own father, who completely destroys him emotionally, teams up with Bane, and is trying to stop Batman being Batman so he can have a normal life, it's an incredibly interesting idea for a character, honestly. But with all the daddy issues Batman has, for his alternate reality father to be so twisted and brutal has got to be a terrifying thought. But what did Thomas do that was so bad? Well, let me tell you. Alongside Bane, he ruined Batman and Catwoman's wedding, causing her to leave him at the altar, nearly had Batman send Mr. Freeze to the afterlife for a crime he did not commit, kidnapped Damian Wayne, hired the KG Beast to take out Dick Grayson, he had Bane put Alfred Pennyworth in the ground, then Thomas incapacitated Bruce with fear toxin and kidnapped him. He dug up the coffin of Martha Wayne, wishing to use the Lazarus Pit to resurrect Martha so that they could all be a happy family again. He went more than a little overboard is what I'm saying. Number 6. The Batman Who Laughs. Another version of Batman, only this time it's basically the ultimate evil version of himself. A Jokerized Bruce Wayne. He is just absolutely awful. He has all the smarts and skill of Batman himself, but the completely bonkers unpredictability of Joker. And this combo causes the Batman Who Laughs to become one of the biggest threats to the entire multiverse. Now, being a Jokerized Bruce Wayne, he has a few differences to the man himself. He's thinner and faster, but physically weaker. Unfortunately, physicality in battle with this guy doesn't really matter. He's got backup in the form of his Dark Knights, and he has backup plans on top of backup plans as any Batman worth his salt would have. This guy put his consciousness into a Batman with the power of Dr. Manhattan and destroyed Perpetua, the first creator of the multiverse and the mother of the Monitor, Anti-Monitor, and the World Forger. Number 5. Pig. Professor Pig is a villain that came to be during a time when Batman's stories were becoming incredibly dark, and Pig himself has to be one of the darkest villains of that era. His methods completely disgust the Dark Knight. He looks like a character straight out of a horror or slasher movie, and his obsession with physical perfection, like in the myth of Pygmalion, became part of the reason he surgically mutilates his victims, turning them into his mind-controlled servants called Dolotrons. If his crimes weren't horrifying enough, then just look at him. Yeah. Get out of my nightmares, thank you. Bye. Number 4. Scarecrow. With Scarecrow, fear is the name of the game. I don't believe Batman is actually scared of Scarecrow himself, but Scarecrow has used his fear toxin to debilitate and send the Dark Knight running on multiple occasions, and that makes him a unique foe that puts Batman in a position he doesn't often find himself in. Batman is a physical powerhouse with a mind that is exceedingly sharp, but his mind is also partially his biggest weakness because he has some serious psychological issues, and Scarecrow's whole shtick is manipulating that kind of thing. When Scarecrow pops up on the scene, the Dark Knight knows that something terrifying is coming his way. Number 3. The Court of Owls. Probably the oldest, most secretive, and most profitable group in Gotham City's underworld. When Bruce Wayne became a threat to them, they put Batman through one hell of a psychological ringer, and possibly one of the darkest Batman stories ever. He gets trapped in a huge Court of Owls maze underneath Gotham City, and trying to make his way through it, Batman goes through physical and psychological tests that nearly break the Dark Knight. But the court has so many feathers in all areas of Gotham and Bruce Wayne's own life. They may have even had a hand in the passing of his parents. Possibly. And we haven't even started talking about the Talons, a group of brainwashed and undead robot-like assassins. The combo of psychological warfare and the deadly Talons nearly brought Bruce Wayne to the pearly gates. Number 2. Bane. His name says it all, as Bane has been the bane of Batman on multiple occasions. The Bane we saw in the Dark Knight Rises movie was fantastic, and he absolutely instilled fear in Batman, but the comic version of that same story goes to a whole other level. With his master plan being even more well thought out and damaging to Batman, he unleashed Arkham Asylum on Gotham, putting Batman on the ropes as he has to chase down all the escaped criminals. Bane studied Batman. He utilizes his own weaknesses and completely destroys Batman, breaking his back in one of the most infamous comic book moments ever. More recently though, Bane brought Batman even lower than when he broke his spine because he broke Bruce's heart by snapping the neck of Alfred Pennyworth. Any battle Batman has fought against Bane has been with the help of his allies, and that's because Batman knows that he can't take on Bane alone. Number 1. the Joker. I think if there is one person who scares Batman more than anyone, it's gotta be the Joker. They have had such a long and complex history with each other, and I think because of that, and the Joker's obsession with the Bat, Joker knows all the ways to mess with Batman, and he's constantly coming up with new ones. He will go after anyone to get at Batman, and he will go through anyone just for the fun of it. He's unpredictable. Batman never knows for sure where he will strike and what he will do unless the Joker wants Batman to know. Everything is a game that he knows the rules to. The other thing about Joker is that he would never actually take the Dark Knight's life. In fact, I feel like he would probably destroy anyone who tries to. This just makes him more terrifying as he simply wants to be a constant cause of fear and anxiety for the Dark Knight, and he is.
Number 10. Bi-Beast. Created by an extinct race of aliens called the Bird People, Bi-Beast is an android with two heads stacked on top of each other. In one head is the knowledge of warfare and tactics, while the other is filled with information on culture. I mean, it's a little weird that the Bird People didn't just put all of this information into one slightly larger head, but hey, I'm just some guy on YouTube. What do I know about alien android design? First appearing in Incredible Hulk number 169, Bi-Beast was left alone in the floating city of Aerie after the extinction of his alien masters. When the city's machines stopped working due to deterioration, Bi-Beast captured Bruce Banner to try and force him to repair them. Banner tricked Bi-Beast and instead used the alien technology to cure Harpy and return her to her true form of Betty Ross. This resulted in a fight between Bi-Beast and the Hulk, but this fight was abandoned when Bi-Beast realized that MODOK was attacking the city. Rather than let the floating city be captured, Bi-Beast activated the city's self-destruct protocols, seemingly dying in the process. Now, Bi-Beast has reappeared a few times in the years since, trying to destroy the world and kill the Hulk, but honestly, other than his strange appearance, there's not much scary about him. But hey, someone's gotta be at the bottom of the list. Number 9. Cyclop. Cyclop is a one-eyed member of an ancient insectoid race who worship the dark gods. Cyclop was chosen to be an agent of these dark gods who gave him the task of finding them a power source that could summon them. If he succeeded, the gods promised to reawaken his race so that they could conquer Earth for themselves. He chose the Hulk as his power source and captured him in Avengers number 88, hoping to shrink him down to a more manageable size. When the Avengers interrupted this process to fight the villain, the Hulk was left alone and no one was able to turn off the machine, and the Jade Giant was accidentally shrunk so small that he vanished from sight. Cyclop found the Hulk in the microverse and the two battled, but Hulk came out victorious. Yet another villain who is more scary looking than anything else. I do like the idea of a bug cultist trying to bring back dark gods in order to take over the world though. He has only had 11 appearances, so maybe he can earn a higher spot on the list at some point in the future.
And at 8, Peeper. Peeper, aka Peter Quinn, is one of the weirder villains on our list. He was recruited by Magneto to be a member of the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but was abandoned with his new teammates when failing their first mission together, and getting defeated by Captain America. From there, he and his band of rejects became the Mutant Force and worked for Mandrill, which also got them arrested. Then, after that, Red Skull became their new sponsor. Years later, he would die at the side of a road, being devoured by Predator X while screaming. So if anything, based on all of that, Peepers doesn't actually seem all that scary now, does he? But in terms of his appearance, those large, eerie eyeballs of his are super unsettling. They give him various optical powers, including telescopic vision, microscopic vision, X-ray vision, and optic blasts. I do not want to know what he uses the X-ray vision for. No. And at 7, Onslaught. First appearing in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 53 in 1996, Onslaught is a sentient psionic entity created from the consciousness of two of the most powerful mutants, Charles Xavier and Magneto. During a prior battle, Xavier would become catatonic when using his abilities to shut down Magneto's mind. He was prompted by Magneto ripping the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton. Yeah, I could imagine why that would piss him off. This caused the darkest parts of Magneto's mind to enter into Xavier's consciousness, merging with the hero's own darkest tendencies, everything that he had repressed for the last 30 years, which eventually grew into an individual persona, otherwise known as Onslaught. After he was defeated the first time, his consciousness lingered, and he would later return the Onslaught Reborn storyline, the brand new but equally scary form. And at 6, Zorn. Zorn is a bit of a confusing character thanks to a series of retcons surrounding him. He worked as a teacher for the Xavier School of Gifted Youngsters, but then it was revealed that he was actually Magneto all along. At this point in time, the metal manipulator was dead. But then it was retconned yet again, revealing that Zorn was just a Magneto imposter monster and not actually Magneto himself. Lisai. Anywho, the reason why he gets a spot on our list is thanks to his dandy little helmet. It's a skull-like helmet, which is scary on its own, but it's meant to contain massive amounts of energy coming off of Zorn's head. He has a star for a brain. I mean, man, like if I saw someone who had a star for a brain, no bueno, avoiding that dude. And at number 5, Dark Beast. Dark Beast is an evil alternate version of Hank McCoy from Earth 295, the Age of Apocalypse reality. Because of Charles Xavier's absence, this version of Hank disregarded all sense of ethics, becoming a mad scientist who worked under Apocalypse. He would conduct cruel and unusual experiments in Apocalypse's name, and even managed to escape that reality before it imploded, showing up on Earth 616 and becoming quite the threat to the X-Men and Hank, and the 616 Hank while he was present. He's 20 years older than the 616 Beast and therefore isn't as physically strong as his counterpart, but still gives him a run for his money. Plus he's villainous, so you know, putting all that brain power to evil uses is not a good thing. Moving on to number 4, Mojo. Mojo is one creepy fella. First appearing in Longshot issue 3 in 1985, Mojo is an absurdist parody of network executives. He's part of an alien race known as the Spineless Ones, and is the dictator and a slaver of a dimension he rules called the Mojoverse, where all of the dimension's inhabitants are obsessed and addicted with Mojo's gladiator television programs. When he was created by Ann Noceti and Art Adams, Noceti specifically requested that Adams make Mojo as disgusting and unpleasant as possible. He's got wires that hold open his eyelids, inspired by A Clockwork Orange. And because of his large size, he rides around on a multi-legged flying platform that's armed with a bunch of deadly weapons and particle beams. In addition to his mastery of manipulation and several of his powers being derived from magic, Mojo is also able to generate an anti-life force field that makes him capable of killing things simply by touching them. He can wither plants and age humans. And at 3, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is one of the X-Men's most fearsome foes. He's an ancient evil, the first mutant, who is practically immortal and sees himself as the father of mutant kind. He operates under very Darwinian principles, believing in the survival of the fittest, killing off the weak in order to make the survivors grow stronger, for the betterment of humanity. He considers himself the apocalypse of the modern man and the father of what humanity will become, mutant kind. He fully believes that what he is doing is the right thing. He's ensuring evolution. Minus how terrifying his ideologies are, his abilities are, intense too. The ones at his disposal are tremendous. He has self-molecular control, a genius-level intellect, he can manipulate matter and energy, he can shapeshift, is capable of accessing astral planes, is telekinetic, telepathic, is a technopath. He can augment the powers of other mutants and transfer someone's consciousness into another being. In all of his appearances over the years, Apocalypse has always been one of the most physically intimidating villains in Marvel's comics, and considering what he's capable of, it's definitely not hard to find the character downright horrifying. And at number 2, Emplate. Emplate may not be as well known of a villain as our previous number, but he's arguably physically more frightening. Emplate is a mutant who physically looks like an emaciated corpse with purple artery-like veins running across his gray flesh. He is not a looker, that's for damn sure. Emplate first came to be in Generation X issue 1 back in 1994, and when his mutant powers first manifested, he was overcome with hunger and killed his mom because of it, causing his father to kick him out. Emplate, who back then was known as Marius St. Croix, sought out the dark arts out of a desire for more power. He would later be rejected by his sister as well, who he would magically trap inside of the form of a mute creature with razor-sharp diamond-hard skin, Penance. While he's only fought the X-Men a handful of times, his powers are not to be taken lightly. He has the ability to siphon mutant energy from bone marrow of mutants. If he siphons all of their energy, they die. While he's feeding from them, he cancels out their powers and often takes on some of his victims' attributes. If he feeds on them multiple times, he gains their powers permanently. So he's basically a mutant vampire. In addition to this, when he feeds, he achieves a measure of psychic control over his victims' minds, making them his subordinates. Scratch that, he is the mutant Dracula. And finally, in at number 1, the Shadow King. The Shadow King is one of Charles Xavier's consistent foes. He was a human mutant from Egypt with vast telepathic powers, which he used for evil, eventually taking on the alias of the Shadow King. Through retconning, he was made into an ancient evil entity. Aside from his bone-chilling appearance, this character scores the top spot on our list thanks to his possession abilities. While in the astral plane, he can possess other beings and control them. So he's basically like a monster out of a horror movie. He's an astral entity who preys on the bodies of highly skilled and powerful psychics, which he then uses to enslave others with. In the Shadow King's native form, he cannot be harmed physically, and he has lived for over a millennia. Generally, the Shadow King is depicted as a large creature with purplish skin, glowing red eyes, sharp claws, and even sharper teeth. Luckily, in order to exist in reality, the Shadow King needs a host, and if that host is killed, it will disperse the Shadow King's astral essence, which can take up to months or years for him to remanifest in his astral form again. Thank God. And at number 10, Barnacle. Barnacle was a character who first was introduced in 1999 in X-Men Magneto War Issue 1. He's a mutant terrorist who has one of the nastiest powers, moisture solidification. He can initiate a chemical reaction that turns moisture into a solid shell, which he uses for various things. It can contain a person in a constructive turtle-like shell with their own bodily fluids. Ew. He can create indestructible armor for himself, and he can spray a stream of hardened barnacle crust through the air. Also ew, because it most likely comes from the moisture in his own body. Super gross. He once tried to screw with Storm and her claustrophobia by encasing her in a hardened shell, but luckily Nightcrawler was there to intervene. Dude is just flat out nasty. And at number 9, Deadbolt. Deadbolt is another smaller villain to make our list, and aesthetically is a very different kind of scary in comparison to our last number. Deadbolt is a living skeleton, contained with an energy field, who could remove pieces of his bones to use as a weapon. His body would immediately regenerate if he did, meaning I guess he's got an arsenal of bone weapons for eternity. He was a member of the Dark Riders, an organization that worked for X-Men Big Bad Genesis. He was initially seemingly killed off by Wolverine, but later it was revealed that one of his fellow Dark Riders was the culprit behind his death. His skull is also split in half, creating devilish-like horns atop of his head. And he's definitely not the kind of villain I'd want to run into in the middle of the night, that's for damn sure.
Number 8, Grail. Grail is the villainous daughter of Darkseid, who also acts as an opposing force to Wonder Woman. She was kind of born to be Diana's rival, really. The two women were born at exactly the same time, and it was prophesied that Grail, the daughter of Darkseid and Myrna, would bring about much destruction. As such, she was almost killed as soon as she was born, but her mother protected her. She proved almost right away in the comics that she was a new villain worthy of our time when she made easy work of the Justice League. She and Diana ended up facing off shortly thereafter, with Grail immediately coming across as a promising and deadly new foe. Number 7, Hush. Hush has managed to pull off some of the most horrific schemes over the years, and gotten under Batman's skin many times. And Catwoman's skin. Literally in this case, when he ended up stealing her actual beating heart. Thomas Elliot is not only a powerful villain because of his intense vendetta against the Wayne family and Batman, but because he also is often shown to have the skill and the strength to match even Batman himself, as well as the cunning. In fact, in some cases, he might come across as even more cunning than Batman. He has taken Batman in hand-to-hand combat and fared surprisingly well, and he's managed to set into action motion outlandish plots like when he impersonated Bruce Wayne in an attempt to steal his life. Number 6, Granny Goodness. Her name might not make her sound terrifying, but Granny Goodness is not even close to as sweet as her name sounds. She became a trainer of Darkseid's soldiers after impressing him when she herself was selected to train and become one of his elite hounds. Those out there who are fans of Kingsman may find the story of how she was trained pretty familiar. During her training regimen, she was given a dog to train who stayed with her and progressed alongside her. Think you know where this is going? After bonding with the loyal doggo, who she named Mercy, she was later instructed to dispose of the dog. Goodness refused and instead disposed of her trainer. When Darkseid asked why she had done this, she revealed that Mercy was actually worth more than her trainer had been to Darkseid, as she had trained the dog to not only be loyal to her, but to Darkseid above her. Darkseid tested this theory by, tragically, ordering Mercy to attack and take out Goodness, and was impressed when he found the dog indeed obeyed him. Goodness then was forced to actually dispose of Mercy, but this act would inspire Darkseid to shape and use Granny Goodness as his most reliable trainer and recruiter of soldiers. That's one haunting origin story. Number 5, Brother Blood. Brother Blood is a pretty terrifying villain, to be honest. He can control his victim's mind if he ends up acquiring his victim's blood. And that isn't just all. Getting their blood, there is a whole slew of powers he can exert over you. In the current continuity, Brother Blood can use the blood of his enemies to heal, rip open teleportation portals, and even project energy. Oh, and he also gains the powers of those whose blood he has tasted. Ew. And of course, once he has your blood, he can also use it to control you, bending you to his will and making you do his bidding. Not only does that mean you are in danger of losing your own free will if you go up against him, but it also means you have to deal with all his servants who have already done so. He also happens to be a weirdly likable guy, so it's pretty easy for him to attract new willing followers to his cause. Currently in the comics, Brother Blood is even using his charismatic personality to present himself as a now redeemed villain, intent on helping to find a new planet for those who join his cause to live on in response to the global climate crisis that the world is experiencing. But we'll have to wait and see if this redemption is actually the real deal or not. I'm not buying it so far, and I'm really excited for when Brother Blood is like, I am a villain the whole time I've been a villain. Yes. Number 4, Darkseid. Darkseid has to be one of the most fearsome villains out there. He is not only the ruler of Apocalypse with an army at his back, but he also has some of the most ruthless, cruel, and elite soldiers in the cosmos. Darkseid has fought and defeated many heroes in the past, even seemingly at one point permanently defeating Batman, although Batman would return and be revealed to have not been permanently taken out actually. Darkseid is terrifying because he is inevitable, best summed up by 2 words: Darkseid is. Number 3, Perpetua. Perpetua is an old evil, but one that we didn't know of in the comics until 2018, when she was first introduced in Justice League Volume 4, issue number 8. Perpetua quickly became known as one of the greatest evils the universe or multiverse had ever known. She was the creator basically of all things, and the mother to the Anti-Monitor, World Forger, and Over-Monitor. She pretty much embodies the dark multiverse in a way. Well, her, I guess, and the Batman Who Laughs, who comes from the dark multiverse. She is known for being one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse, and is considered an Omega-level cosmic entity, basically an evil goddess who is fueled by crisis energy and aims to use it to destroy and rebuild the entire multiverse. Number 2, Batman Who Laughs. Although he may currently be defeated in the comics, make no mistake that the Batman Who Laughs remains one of the most terrifying characters to come out of DC Comics' dark multiverse. Batman Who Laughs hails from the Earth of -22 and is a version of Bruce Wayne who ended up being turned insane by exposure to the Joker venom. This version of Bruce killed all of his fellow Bat family members except for Damian, who he instead recruited to join him. Batman Who Laughs would serve Barbados, the Bat God, and go on to assemble an army of Dark Knights for him from across the dark multiverse to join him in reshaping and conquering all of reality. From there, he would ally himself with Perpetua and would even go on to betray her, revealing the whole time that he sought to conquer the multiverse himself, so he might reshape it in his own image, becoming one of the most feared villains in all of DC's history. Number 1, Upside Down Man. While not officially stated as such, the Upside Down Man is kind of godlike in his appearance in DC Comics. He is the dark reflection of Hecate, who is quite dark herself, so that is honestly saying something. And she is considered to be a goddess and powerful witch, so I think we can consider him to be at a god level, and of course Upside Down Man is also a powerful magic user who seeks to invade and devour the Prime Earth reality after being trapped for millennia in the dark multiverse with the other kind, banished there by Hecate, or Hecate, whatever you prefer. Number 10, Jane Doe. Jane Doe is a mass taker of lives who served time at Arkham Asylum. She appears to not have any skin of her own, with muscle tissue fully exposed, making her one of the most frightening villains to look at on our list, that is for sure. Instead of wearing her own skin, she covets the skin and lives of others. While she doesn't appear to have any specific superpowers, it has been implied that she might be capable of shapeshifting. She often gets to know her victims before taking their lives and adopting their identities, sometimes even wearing their preserved skin as a suit. Ew. Instead of simply using makeup to disguise herself. I mean, honestly, I don't think you should be putting makeup on exposed muscle tissue anyways. That seems like a good way to, I don't know, get an infection or something. I don't even know how Jane Doe has lived like this actually, if she really is as she appears to be. Even with her not wearing makeup and just wearing, I guess, skin suits. I don't know, still seems like it shouldn't be possible, especially if she doesn't have powers. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9, Zonas. You might know about Darkseid, who belongs to the new gods, but do you know about Zonas, who belongs to the old gods? After all, for there to be new gods, there have to have been old gods, right? Zonas is one of the old gods and is in fact believed to have been the last old god. He was known as the god of evil, or Yuga Khan. At one point, he wielded anti-life, claiming that it was what allowed him to resurrect the old gods, and he is believed to be the original being to first wield Omega beams. Zonas ended up being trapped in the source, and even after escaping the prison and attempting to destroy all of creation, was defeated and imprisoned there once again.
Number 8, Supergiant. Although the other members of the Black Order made an appearance in the MCU, one member was unfortunately shafted, and that is none other than Supergiant, the mentally unstable omnipath and telepathic parasite who seeks out intellect and devours it. In the comics, Supergiant had absolutely no issues with taking out the Jean Grey School and the X-Men associated with it. Later on, when the Black Order seized Wakanda, Supergiant was left in control of Black Bolt, whom she would mentally order to activate the bombs the Illuminati hid in Wakanda's necropolis. Upon activating the bomb, Supergiant was faced by Maximus, who had the trigger, and Maximus triggered the bomb, but also used Lockjaw to transport Supergiant along with the bomb to a distant uninhabited planet where she perished in the explosion of the bomb, although she did later return as a mental projection and even attempted to take over the body of Captain Glory so she could continue wreaking havoc on the world. Thankfully though, she was eventually taken out for good by the Lethal Legion while trying to take over Thor's mind. Check her out for yourself, starting with her first appearance in 2013's Infinity, number 1.
Number 7. Three Mothers. Death of Doctor Strange is an overarching story and miniseries that really has it all. It has drama, mystery, romance, heartbreak, and of course, lots of horrifying moments to just round it all out. The story delivers on what the title promises, the death of Doctor Strange. After his death, it is revealed Strange had some fail-safes in place to help him actually solve his own murder. A past version of Strange appears and ends up hot on the trail of solving his own murder with the help of magical allies such as Wong and Clea. We're also introduced to the Three Mothers, villains who live to feed another possibly even more terrifying entity who's actually their own master, known as the Peregrine Child. Number 6. Chthon. Doctor Strange is one of the few who is strong enough to actually fight against Chthon. For those who are not familiar, Chthon is often attached to Scarlet Witch in Marvel Comics and is a demonic elder god, one of the oldest entities in the Marvel Universe. He is the one who is often believed to have granted Scarlet Witch her chaos magic abilities and has been known from time to time to possess Wanda as such, using her as his host. Doctor Strange is an immensely powerful magic user and is actually one of the few who can resist Chthon's influence and avoid becoming Chthon's mindless puppet. Strange has fought against Chthon many times, including when Scarlet Witch was possessed by Chthon during Secret Empire, with Strange being the one to actually free Wanda from Chthon's influence. Number 5. Nightmare. Nightmare is one of Doctor Strange's first ever villains. In fact, the first ever Doctor Strange villain in terms of comic book appearances. Nightmare made his first appearance alongside Doctor Strange, who also made his debut appearance in issue 110 of Strange Tales, released back in April of 1963. What makes Nightmare a villain to be feared? He plagues his victims using nightmares, reveling and finding power in their fear. Nightmare has been known in the comics for palling around in the past with the equally, if not more terrifying, baddie, Shuma-Gorath. Nightmare is also in essence immortal. As long as people dream, he will continue to exist. He is the ruler of the Nightmare Dimension, one of the splinter realms of the Dream Dimension, and is actually considered to be the most powerful of the Splinter Realms rulers. Number 4. Shuma-Gorath. Shuma-Gorath is one of the Great Old Ones, and many-angled ones, basically a Marvel version of an Elder God. Like Dormammu, he is also known to be one of the Lords of Chaos, although it's been kinda unclear throughout the comic lore as to whether there truly are multiple of those, or just one Lord of Chaos, who kinda like continues to be renamed throughout history. The many-angled ones are known for being one of the oldest kinds of entities in the Marvel Universe. Shuma-Gorath has returned to Earth many times and set up as a god there, being worshipped even on Earth before the sinking of Atlantis, where he demanded blood sacrifices. That's how you know he's evil and he's scary. Number 3. Umar. Umar is the sister of Dormammu. She is known as a powerful sorceress and villain who sometimes works alongside her brother when she's not busy devising her own devious plots, which sometimes involve basically getting back at her brother for something. While many people think of Dormammu as being the more terrifying of the two of these beings, Umar was actually also very active in helping to conquer the Dark Dimension. In fact, she may have even ended up the ruler of the Dark Dimension in Dormammu's place if she hadn't been exhausted due to dealing with the mindless ones. Umar is just as terrifying, if not at times I would say more so, than her brother. Number 2. Death. Death has to be one of the most frightening villains that Doctor Strange has fought against. Although sometimes Death isn't really a villain and is more like a neutral being. But I do also mean literally fought against, if you're wondering. I don't just mean like, oh, when Doctor Strange had to face Death. No, I mean literally fought. When most people think Death in regards to the Marvel Universe, they think of Mistress Death, the pretty woman that embodies the concept whom Thanos is in love with and whom in the comics he destroyed half of all life in the cosmos in an attempt to impress. However, Death can take many different forms, and in Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme issue number 55, Death is a creepy looking skeleton instead, who comes to claim Strange, threatening to take Strange back to its realm after claiming Strange's life. Here, Death torments Strange, trying to like sort of basically get him to lose his willpower here and cave in, give up, as the issue's main antagonist by making him relive the loss of his family, with him re-experiencing the loss of his sister, his brother, and his parents. Yeah, if you didn't know, Strange has siblings, he's lost them, and he's lost a lot of people. Like, Strange actually has a really tragic life. We should do a top 10 worst things that have happened to Doctor Strange if we haven't already. Number 1. Mephisto. Mephisto is often thought of as the devil of Marvel. He rules over his own hellish dimension and is known for making lots of contracts with heroes that usually result in them being very unhappy in the end, despite getting what they wanted, much like the devil in various tales and lore. He's not someone you wanna make a bargain with, as typically there are conditions, which means that Mephisto often comes out on top in the end, even though, he gave you what you wanted. Mephisto is both demonic and magical in terms of his origin and classification in Marvel's various realms of categories for characters. And if he plays his cards right, he can even use his powers to warp the reality of the universe, which we've actually seen him successfully do a few different times. Unlike most other characters in Marvel Comics, Mephisto is one of the rare few who have actually had success with making his changes to reality permanent. Mephisto is also a formidable foe in one-on-one combat, being that he is also super strong, durable, fast, and virtually immortal. Trust me, you wouldn't want to dance with this devil in the pale moonlight.
Number 10. Styx. Starting off the list today with a pretty terrifying mutant. Jacob Acorn was once a homeless man who was approached on the street by a medical researcher to participate in an experiment involving some new pharmaceuticals, and he obviously accepted because the pay was good and there were very few risks. It was revealed that during the trial, the researcher had actually lied about what he was looking into. The trial was about exploring whether the human body could develop an immunity to cancer, so Jacob was injected with a mutated cancer compound. Alongside developing an immunity to the disease, he also became a living cancer cell with the ability to kill organic matter just by touching it. However, his mind was also tainted and he took up the name Styx after the river Styx. Jacob quickly developed an affinity for death, finding it was the only thing that could bring him happiness, and alongside Gerald Stone, the two made a deadly mercenary duo. Now, I highly doubt that Marvel will ever consider bringing this baddie into the MCU because his origins are way too dark for good old Disney, plus he is a ruthless killer who does it for nothing more than just pleasure. So, for now, check him out in comic book form in his first appearance in 1988's Amazing Spider-Man number 309. Number 9. Bullseye. Known as the Mercenary of Mystery, Lester, insert name last year, might not have any powers, but that by no means makes him any less terrifying. Lester has always been a master marksman, and before his mercenary career, he tried his hand at Major League Baseball, but quickly grew bored with it because he was constantly pitching perfect games. However, he quickly found his true calling as a special operative of the United States National Security Agency. Not long after, he became a freelance merc because he found too much joy in killing his targets with his signature killing method: throwing things. Gaining a reputation in New York City, Bullseye was hired to take down Matt Murdock, but ultimately failed every time as he was stopped by, Daredevil. Later on, we see him go up against the likes of the Punisher and Spider-Man and walk away to tell the tale, which is quite the feat for someone with no powers. The worst thing this villain ever did, in my opinion at least, was kill not one, but two of Daredevil's girlfriends, Elektra and Karen Page. This led to his demise at the hands of Daredevil, of course, because I can't imagine anyone who wouldn't want revenge after that. I doubt we'll ever see Bullseye in the MCU because 1, we already have a master marksman in the form of Hawkeye, and 2, his methods of torture and his sadistic nature are utterly terrifying, and putting that on the big screen would be too much in my opinion. Check out this character for yourself and let me know what you think, starting with his first appearance in 1976's Daredevil number 131. Number 8. Blackheart. A slightly lesser known villain and utterly terrifying son of the demon Mephisto. Usually depicted as an enemy of Ghost Rider, this all-powerful demon is one of the most powerful in the Marvel Universe and possesses a vast array of magical powers, including telekinesis, telepathy, the ability to travel dimensions, and of course, the ability to project energy blasts out of his hands. Under his father's tutelage, Blackheart explored and learned everything about being evil in nature and has attempted to corrupt many of our favorite heroes, such as Ghost Rider, Spider-Man, and Wolverine. Blackheart is the leader of the Spirits of Vengeance, a group that was created to oppose the Ghost Rider, and with their help he caused some serious damage in the Marvel Universe. Skip ahead of it and we see Blackheart with some newly acquired demonic powers attempting to take over the Earth by himself. Thankfully this was stopped by the Avengers and Spider-Man, but not before he could rip out the Falcon's soul and send it to hell. I feel Blackheart is way too scary for the MCU because not only is he the son of Mephisto, a demon so powerful we've only ever heard of him in the MCU, he is the embodiment of evil itself with so many powers making him a ginormous threat. Imagine him getting introduced alongside Mephisto. I mean, any fight against the two would be over in the blink of an eye. Give Blackheart's origin a read for yourself, starting with 1989's Daredevil number 270, and let me know if you think he could ever make it on the big screen one day in the comments below.
And speaking of which, at number 7 is Sin Eater. In the Marvel Comics universe, not all villains are flashy, superpowered beings. Meet Stanley Carter, for instance, a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent turned NYPD officer who snapped after his partner's demise, who perished in the line of duty, and Stanley Carter became the chilling serial unaliver known as the Sin Eater, who vowed to take out those he felt were sinners. His victims included a police captain, a judge, and even a priest, with Spider-Man nearly crossing his own moral line in the process. Now what sets Sin Eater apart is his lack of interest in being a traditional supervillain. He's a remorseless vigilante driven solely by a dark sense of justice, making him one of Spider-Man's most disturbing adversaries. At number 6 is the Lizard. Enter Dr. Curt Connors, a brilliant army surgeon who paid a steep price for his dedication to saving lives. After losing his arm in the crucible of battle, Connors embarked on a desperate quest to regrow his missing limb, and his solution? A serum rooted in the DNA of reptiles, a decision that would forever change his destiny. The consequences were chilling. The serum transformed Connors into the grotesque Lizard, a hulking reptilian menace devoid of self-control. With his psyche imprisoned, Dr. Connors became a nightmarish force of nature, leaving destruction in his wake. Though Spider-Man made an antidote to quell his reptilian rampage, the specter of the Lizard continues to haunt Dr. Connors, persisting as one of Spider-Man's most poignant and terrifying foes. At number 5 is Vermin. Edward Whalen, a genius geneticist who endured a harrowing upbringing under the cruel hand of his father, but ultimately Edward's brilliance would serve as the catalyst for his descent into the abyss of villainy. It was a sinister alliance with Baron Zemo and Primus that sealed his gruesome fate. Subjected to a diabolical experiment, Edward emerged as the grotesque Vermin, a rat-like abomination with the insatiable appetite for human flesh. Now, Vermin lurks in the murky depths of Manhattan's sewers, a denizen of the city's darkest underbelly. His once brilliant mind has been cruelly eroded, unable to even remember the life he once had. At number 4 is the Swarm. In the web of Marvel's rogues gallery, there exists a truly spine-tingling villain born from the annals of macabre imagination. Fritz von Meyer, an evil scientist with sinister ambitions, sought refuge in the depths of South America following the tumultuous end of World War II, and we can all guess which side he was on. His post-war existence, however, took a bizarre twist when he donned the mantle of a humble beekeeper, but fate had a malevolent design in store for Fritz. Beneath the tropical canopy, he stumbled upon a colony of bees, oddly mutated by some sinister force. In a grisly turn of events, Fritz's quest to subdue the colony led to his untimely demise as he was devoured alive by the very creatures he sought to control. All that remained in the end were his skeletal remains, yet his tale doesn't end there. In a truly nightmarish turn, the bees actually absorbed Fritz's consciousness, merging his with the swarming hive mind of their own, and the result was an abomination known as Swarm, a being composed of thousands of bees acting in macabre unison, each dancing to the nightmarish symphony of Fritz's malevolent will. At number 3, the Thousand. In the comics, few Spider-Man villains are as unsettling as Carl King, who actually started off as one of Peter's high school bullies alongside Flash. Now, he was one of the few who actually witnessed Peter Parker's spider bite, and then was the only one who witnessed Peter's newfound powers thereafter, and so he sought similar powers and actually went on to eat the radioactive spider that bit Peter in the first place. Kind of a weird way of doing it, and so instead of acquiring new abilities, he transformed into the Thousand, a nightmarish collective of cyclically linked spiders. These spiders infiltrate and control victims by consuming them from the inside. Carl's mother was the first victim, but many followed thereafter. The Thousand is a chilling reminder that in the Spider-Man universe, true terror often arises from unexpected sources, making them the most spine-tingling foes in the web-slingers rogues gallery. At number 2 is Carnage. also known as Cletus Cassidy, a name that chills the spine, because he's a man whose descent into darkness was inevitable. Born without superpowers, he wielded the horrific potential within his twisted soul. See, it all began when he was just a child, committing his first heinous act by sending his grandmother tumbling down a staircase. Just a glimpse into the malevolence that lay dormant beneath this character's psyche. The St. Estes Home for Boys, an ill-fated refuge, failed to contain his rage. The disciplinarian administration met their grim end at his hands, and a poor girl met her doom beneath the wheels of a bus, and thereafter he left the orphanage reduced to smoldering ruins. Cassidy's score count probably spiraled into the dozens by this point. But his malevolence met its match when he found himself behind the bars of Rikers Island, sharing a cell with none other than Eddie Brock. Venom's chaotic escape left an indelible mark as a fragment of the symbiote left behind by Venom had merged with Cassidy, birthing none other than the monstrous Carnage. From then on, the nightmare had only begun, unleashing a new terror upon an unsuspecting world. And at number 1 is Green Goblin. In the annals of Marvel Comics, few villains send shivers down the spine quite like Norman Osborn, unwitting creator of the maniacal Green Goblin. A quest for strength and intellect led to a catastrophic incident, granting Osborn great power but also shattering his sanity. As the Green Goblin, Osborn became not just Spider-Man's nemesis, but a threat to the entire Marvel universe. His reign of terror left a grim trail of casualties, none more tragic than the unaliving of Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's main love interest, which was a cold-hearted act just to torment Spider-Man. The Green Goblin's unpredictability, cunning, and ruthlessness make him one of Marvel's most enduring and fearsome foes, a chilling reminder of the darkness lurking in Spider-Man's world.
Number 10, Doomsday. I have to just assume that Batman is afraid of Doomsday, and there are multiple reasons I believe this. For starters, anytime I've seen Batman even attempt to get involved in a fight with Doomsday, he is never throwing punches. He is either staying the heck out of the way, maybe only acting as a distraction, or he is powered up by some serious magical artifacts. Secondly, Batman is incredibly smart. He knows how hard it is for someone to take down Superman, and the fact that Doomsday is one of the few characters who is able to do it, and with such brutality, there is no way Batman is not intimidated by this monster. I refuse to believe it. Honestly, my favorite point of proof is seeing what Ben Affleck's Batman does in Batman vs Superman. Say what you want about that movie, but Batman jumping around the battlefield just trying his best to stay out of the way? Hilarious. Number 9, Prometheus. As a dramatic inversion of Batman, the tragic figure of Prometheus presents a serious threat to the Dark Knight. Enraged by the passing away of his parents at the hands of law enforcement, Prometheus vows to fight the law with the same intensity that Batman seeks to uphold it. Backed by ludicrous sums of money, Prometheus trains diligently and becomes the bane of police officers and military men across America. Armed with an all-powerful helmet, Prometheus earns godlike powers that give him the strength of the best fighters on Earth. It's no wonder that when he breaks into the Justice League Watchtower, he single-handedly beats the majority of the team, and Batman takes the majority of that shellacking. Prometheus runs the Dark Knight into the ground. It was the first showdown between the two orphans, and Prometheus takes the victory without any effort at all. Hey, are you liking this video? Well, then hit that thumbs up button, rookie. We need your support. Number 8, Zsasz. Victor Zsasz has a character trait that a few others on this list possess. He's just completely and utterly insane. Zsasz scares Batman for one main reason. Whenever he is not locked up, it's almost guaranteed that lives will come to an end, which just ups the ante because every escape of this killer becomes a race against the clock for Batman. He needs to bring him down fast before he adds another scar to his body. Every single one of those scars signifies a failure for Batman. Zsasz is a man with absolutely no form of pity or morals, and he will never stop unless he passes away, but we know Batman will never do that. In an alternate story, Injustice, Zsasz is even responsible for the passing of Alfred Pennyworth, which was not supposed to happen, but because Zsasz is Zsasz, it did.
At number 7 are the Marvel Zombies. In the twisted Marvel Zombies universe, where heroes hunger for the flesh of the living, an unexpected and mind-boggling team unfolded. You see, Galactus, the cosmic devourer of worlds, was rendered into a grotesque figure, a far cry from his formidable 616 incarnation. You see, in this nightmarish reality, Galactus manifested as a corporeal being which is vulnerable to the insatiable appetites of the zombie Avengers. It's kind of weird because these undead mortals eventually feast upon a cosmic entity known for its indomitable might. While it's explained that the Galactus of Earth 2149 was crafted from flesh, a startling departure from what we're used to. Because as he's depicted in 616, Galactus' true form isn't a physical body, but rather abstract energy. The big dude in a funny suit we see is just what our minds can comprehend, like how Pennywise is actually a cosmic spider. So anyway, Mark Miller's zombie series introduced this shocking image of the zombies eating Galactus, leaving subsequent writers little choice but follow suit. As the zombie Avengers devoured Galactus, they unwittingly inherited his purpose, setting off a multiversal buffet until the cosmic meal dwindled and the cosmic power ran out, returning them to their ravenous roots. At number 6 are the Secret Six, a team once heralded as heroes back in the 60s, but slowly became an unexpected amalgamation of villainy that took the comic world by surprise. Unlike your run-of-the-mill baddie alliances, this group incorporated a diverse roster with Deadshot, Bane, and Harley Quinn, and even the notorious Joker claiming membership. But what's truly shocking is the mysterious puppeteer known as Mockingbird. It's like discovering that Batman has been secretly pulling the strings for the Joker all along. The revelation that the Riddler or Lex Luthor also had their hands in the mix is sort of like unearthing the Pandora's box of villainy. These unexpected team-ups redefine the very essence of villainy and heroism, demonstrating that in the realm of comics, the line between good and evil can blur in the most spine-chilling ways. Speaking of which, at number 5 is Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers. Spider-Man's most terrifying villain is allowed to form his own Avengers? Now that's scary. Following the Skrull invasion, Osborn seized control of S.H.I.E.L.D., manipulating them in the Thunderbolt to create his own sinister version of the Avengers under the guise of the Hammer Agency. What makes this alliance truly spine-chilling is the unsettling cast of heroes, quote-unquote, that Osborn assembled. Bullseye is posed as Hawkeye, Venom as Spider-Man, and Moonstone as Miss Marvel, each of them concealing their secretly malevolent intentions. Ares and Sentry, once heroes, found themselves tainted by their affiliation with Osborn's dark agenda. Yet, the most disturbing transformation lay in Daken, who assumed the mantle of Wolverine, and Novarb, who became Captain Marvel. Norman himself adopted the Iron Patriot suit, twisting patriotism into something nightmarish. At number 4 is Magneto and Red Skull. In the convoluted tapestry of comic book alliances, the pairing of Red Skull and Magneto is nothing short of a paradoxical enigma. Two diametrically opposed figures, their shared history is a testament to the complexity in the Marvel Universe. Their initial encounter during the Acts of Vengeance storyline was marked by Magneto's seething contempt for the embodiment of the evil that Red Skull represents. This animosity is well founded, considering Magneto's harrowing experiences during the event from World War II, which shall not be named. Yet, as the narrative threats of Marvel Comics tend to weave, we find Magneto standing shoulder to shoulder with the very antagonist he once despised. In Deadpool eliminates the Marvel Universe again, and in Old Man Logan, these universes both witnessed Magneto's unsettling alliance with Red Skull as they collaborated to further their nefarious ambition. This unlikely partnership serves as a testament to the ever-shifting alliances and allegiances and the moral ambiguities that define the Marvel Universe, where heroes and villains dance on a precarious tightrope of alliances and rivalry. At number 3, the Crime Master and Toxin. Let's take a look at the shocking collaboration between Flash Thompson, known as Agent Venom, and the notorious Crime Master during the Agent Venom storyline. See, at first glance, it seemed like an ordinary showdown between hero and villain, but beneath the surface, a sinister plot was unfolding. The Crime Master, the ever-cunning mastermind, developed a plan that transcended mere villainy. See, he coerced Eddie Brock, the former Venom, into joining his malevolent cause. However, his ambition didn't stop there. Using the formidable symbiote Toxin, the Crime Master forcibly merged it with Eddie, creating an unholy alliance. Together with the villains, they embarked on a campaign of terror, targeting not just Agent Venom, but also his loved one, revealing a level of malevolence that left readers in complete shock. At number 2 is Judge Joker. Now, the scariest villain team-ups often emerge when you least expect them, like when the Joker, infamous for his lack of superpowers, ventured beyond his universe. In the Batman/Judge Dredd's, Joker wields unimaginable powers after crossing into Judge Dredd's realm via a multiversal teleportation belt. He aids Judge, unalive, a malevolent entity seeking to annihilate all life across the multiverse. In return, Judge, unalive, imparts sinister abilities upon Joker, transforming him into another Dark Judge. Joker's newfound power allows him to make heads explode with his laughter, a grotesque and quite fitting ability. Each Dark Judge gains powers tied to their obsessions, making Joker's lethal laughter a darkly logical choice. He becomes immortal in this form, impervious to harm. However, the Joker's return to his original self is a twist in itself. See, if he had retained these abilities, he'd be unstoppable amidst even DC's mightiest heroes. While it's disappointing for the Clown Prince of Crime, his cinematic presence would dwindle with these R-rated powers, a reminder that sometimes unexpected alliances lead to frankly horrifying outcomes. And at number 1 is the Injustice League. The Injustice League, a formidable gathering of DC's most notorious and evildoers, is typically led by the brilliant Lex Luthor, featuring iconic antagonists like the Joker, Deathstroke, Black Manta, Cheetah, and Sinestro. The Injustice League is a force to be reckoned with. However, their effectiveness as a team pales in comparison to their individual endeavors, primarily due to the Justice League's seamless teamwork. Interestingly, for those seeking the Legion of Doom, think of it as a rebranding of the Injustice League. The Super Friends are essentially mirrored in the Justice League. At number 10 is Carnage and the Joker. Sounds like absolute chaos. As the Marvel and DC universes converged, the plot unfolded with a certain unnaturalness as Dr. Cassandra Breyer's audacious attempt to pacify these two malevolent menaces using microchips took an ominous turn when Carnage, the symbiote psychopath, effortlessly short-circuited the implant. Meanwhile, the Joker, not to be outdone, suffered a similar fate. This nightmarish duo then embarked on an unaliving spree, with their unholy union a brief affair. However, there was a clash between them, driven by differing philosophies on eliminating people, which culminated in an epic showdown with Batman and Spider-Man. You see, Joker was all about having a plan, and Carnage was like, screw that, let's just cause chaos, and apparently, their different philosophies didn't coalesce. Carnage and the Joker's inability to cooperate, while expected, was a fortunate twist, preventing unimaginable catastrophe. I mean, had these two serial unalivers coordinated, countless lives would have been lost to their chaotic malevolence. At number 9 is the Leader and the One Below All. Comic world has witnessed some spine-tingling team-ups, but few saw the nightmarish alliance between the Hulk's arch-nemesis, the Leader, and the malevolent cosmic entity known as the One Below All. The Jade Giant, who's known for smashing his way through the MCU, has transformed into a true horror icon in the comics thanks to the masterful storytelling in Immortal Hulk. Enter the One Below All, which is a sinister, demonic force that Samuel Stearns, the brilliant but deranged leader, willingly submits to. His aim is to obliterate not only the Hulk, but the entire world, morphing it into a grotesque Cronenberg-esque nightmare. The unholy partnership has taken the Hulk's adversaries to a whole new level of terror, creating a chilling narrative that keeps fans on the edge of their seats. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell.
Number 8. Lord Armageddon. The warlord of an alien race called the Trojan. Armageddon led his armies to numerous victories against several worlds in his efforts to expand his empire. He was so consumed with this expansion that he didn't notice when his wife died giving birth to his twin sons. When one of his twins was murdered by Atalanta, the surviving son fell in love with her and decided to try and marry her, and kidnapped her, bringing her back to his homeworld. Lord Armageddon supported this, and when Hulk and the Silver Surfer came to try and rescue Atalanta, Armageddon managed to incapacitate both the heroes. When his son Trauma fell on a broken piece of armor and died, he asked his father to give the heroes and his beloved safe passage home. Armageddon later tried to bring his son back to life, but the machine he was using was destroyed by Hulk. Although this earned the Hulk Armageddon's respect, it also caused him to vow revenge on the Hulk. I think anyone who is so obsessed with interstellar domination and who can fight the Hulk and the Silver Surfer is pretty scary, but mostly just because of how much raw power they are dealing with. So if this were a video ranking the powers of the villains, perhaps he would be higher on this list. Number 7. Harpy. After longtime Hulk love interest Betty Ross's husband was seemingly killed in a rescue mission gone wrong, she suffered a nervous breakdown. MODOK learned of this and pumped her full of gamma radiation, hoping to create a creature that could go toe-to-toe with the Hulk. The gamma rays gave Betty wings, talons, and the ability to shoot dangerous rays from her hands, and she became the insane creature known as Harpy. As stated before, Bruce Banner was able to use Bi-Beast's tech to save her, and Betty would go on to marry Bruce, die, and then come back to life as the Red She-Hulk, before further mutating into the Red Harpy, who is more of an ally to the Hulk than an enemy. Harpy has a scary look, no doubt, but what I find scary about her is more so the idea of the person Hulk loves more than anything becoming a monster that wants him dead. Having to then fight her and deal with the fact that even if he wins the fight, he's just hurt Betty. It adds a certain level of dread and nuance that you don't get with a lot of the other villains. Number 6. Absorbing Man. After the death of his mother, Carl Creel's father became abusive towards him, eventually kicking him out to live on the street when he eventually tried to fight back. In order to survive, Creel engaged in petty theft to support himself while building his career as a boxer. Creel eventually became an enforcer for the Owl before getting arrested. While serving his sentence, he was chosen by Loki to be a pawn in one of his schemes against Thor. Loki spiked the inmate's water with Asgardian herbs that granted him the power to absorb the properties of any element he touched. He used his powers to absorb the powers and properties of Mjolnir, Thor's magical hammer, and was able to successfully take on the God of Thunder, although he was eventually defeated in a rematch. Absorbing Man went on to battle many heroes, including the Hulk, who he was hired to kill by an evil organization called They Who Wield Power. Although this didn't work, he did tangle with the Hulk a few other times, such as when they fought on Easter Island, and Absorbing Man absorbed the island in hopes of taking over the world. I didn't include Absorbing Man in the first video because he has fought so many Marvel heroes that it's hard to call him a Hulk villain. However, he is a major player in the Immortal Hulk series, so let's go with it. In this series, he was given an injection of Hulk Plug, which turned him red and let him absorb gamma radiation. He fought the Hulk and inadvertently absorbed the demonic being known as the One Below All. This gave Creel a very painful looking and significantly more terrifying appearance, and caused him, Hulk, and all the members of Gamma Flight to be transported to the Demon's Realm. Creel helped stop the One Below All and was offered a spot on Gamma Flight by Puck, where he currently works as a hero rather than a villain. Number 5. Glob. When a prisoner named Joe Timms learned that the love of his life was dying, Joe decided to escape prison in order to see her one last time. Unfortunately for him, he drowned in the swamp near the prison before he could make it back to her. Years later, the Hulk was disposing of a barrel of radioactive waste, and in a move that I'm sure the EPA would be horrified by, threw it into the swamp. The waste revived Timms and transformed his body into the deformed, gloopy mess you see before you. Because she seemingly just can't catch a break, Betty Ross was mistaken by the Glob for his lost love. This caused Glob to kidnap her and for the Hulk to go after him. As a creature of goop, the Hulk was unable to damage him with his fists, and if he hadn't been destroyed by the same radioactive waters that spawned him, Hulk may have been out of luck. Glob was later reformed by the leader and has tangled with the Hulk a few times in the years since. Speaking of which, number 4, the leader. Samuel Stearns was a man of below average intelligence who was working at a chemical plant when one of the canisters of waste he was moving broke open and doused him in the toxic waste. On the plus side, rather than giving him cancer, it gave him super intelligence. On the flip side, it also caused his head to grow to a massive size and for his skin to turn green. Stearns decided to dedicate himself to taking over the world and started calling himself the leader. Now, there is no doubt that the leader is one of Hulk's greatest foes, if not the greatest of them. I mean, it's either him or Abomination. A lot of you were shocked at him being left off of part 1 of this list, and honestly, my reasoning was that the leader isn't especially scary compared to the other villains he recruits for his schemes against the Hulk. However, considering the amount of horrifying plots he is responsible for, combined with how disturbing the character was in his run in Immortal Hulk when he grew to giant size and attacked the Hulk with tendrils, I'm happy to include him here. While we're on the subject, I'm currently working on a video about the Immortal Hulk for our Attempting to Explain series, so keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. Number 3, Madman. Coming in at the number 3 slot, we actually have the leader's brother, Philip Stearns. Phil was a student at Caltech at the same time as Bruce Banner. Although brilliant in his own right, he was jealous of Bruce's superior intellect and developed an obsession with his classmate. When Bruce became the Hulk, this infatuation became and dangerous, as Phil started experimenting on himself with gamma radiation in order to try and be more like his favorite hero. Not only did this result in Stearns becoming a super strong, deformed monster, but it caused what was left of his sanity to snap, and him to develop multiple personality disorder. Although he initially tried to kill the Hulk, he later changed his mind, deciding to remain a villain, but to not kill Hulk, as life would be too boring without him to annoy. Now, the idea of a Hulk who has developed DID and is obsessed with Bruce Banner and the Hulk is pretty disturbing, and is frightening enough that the leader actually once teamed up with the Hulk to defeat him, confessing to Hulk that he is scared of Madman. Although years later, Leader would eventually kill his brother in Thunderbolts Volume 2, Issue 6. Number 2. Xemnu. This fluffy beast is an alien with the power to hypnotize people on a mass scale who crash-landed on Earth. He planned on using his hypnotic powers to make the people of Earth build him a new ship in order to return to his home planet, despite the fact that the force of the rocket would tear the Earth apart. Although this plan failed, Xemnu did eventually make his way back to his home planet, where he discovered that everyone had died of disease. He returned to Earth, where he was engaged in many schemes to use his hypnotism to take over the planet. He has fought a lot of heroes such as Namor, Iron Man, and Deadpool, but he seems to hate the Hulk the most. In one of his more creative schemes, he tricked the Hulk into defeating a monster, causing a wave of parasites to be unleashed on nearby civilians. Xemnu then showed up and stopped the parasites and implanted false memories in all the witnesses' minds of him being a hero. He continued to use these powers to turn public opinion against the Hulk before Hulk eventually defeated him. When killed, Xemnu can reform his body by taking over someone else's body and gradually transforming it into his. As if that wasn't bad enough, he has developed a taste for humans and regularly consumes them in brutal and terrifying ways. Number 1. The One Below All. So the One Above All is the ruler of the multiverse and the creator of all life in it. Although he is the source of love and good, he also has an evil form known as the One Below All, who is the personification of hatred and destruction. The ruler of the lowest point of reality, the below place, it is able to manifest itself on Earth through the mutagenic form of gamma radiation. This means that when Bruce Banner was caught in the gamma bomb, he was infused with this dark entity's power. The One Below All wants to become the only remaining thing in the multiverse and destroy everything else. As he is incapable of having his own personality without a host, it waited until Hulk's father, Brian Banner, died to merge with him and take on his personality, which, if you know the character or watched part 1 of this video, you know is a really bad thing. The leader eventually managed to absorb Brian's soul in hopes of learning more about the One Below All, but was possessed by the One Below All. It's hard to say which actions to count as the One Below Alls and which to count as Brian Banner or the leaders, but his influence is undeniably horrible and worthy of the top spot on this list.
Number 10. Dormammu. One of the most powerful magical villains in the Marvel Universe is definitely Dormammu, especially if you end up going to the Dark Dimension to face him. Here, Dormammu reigns supreme, and so his power is considered limitless. I don't know about you, but if Dormammu is ruling, I'm pretty much just going to stay out of the Dark Dimension, I think. I think that's a good idea if he's there. At one point, Doctor Strange even ended up as Dormammu's prisoner in the comics, trapped in the Dark Dimension alongside his defenders, and for a surprisingly lengthy period of time too. In fact, Strange almost gave up hope that he'd actually even get out at one point. Dormammu himself is composed of mystical energy. He's basically like a big ball of flaming magic. He's virtually immortal, while in his dimension can manipulate matter as he sees fit, can control the elements, and can change shape and size at will. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know that you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. Dracula. When we think of scary villains in general, many of us probably normally think of scary monsters that we've seen in movies and read about in iconic literature, like Dracula. Well, Dracula, thanks to Dracula being considered public domain, he also exists in most comic book realities as well, including that of Marvel Comics. And guess what? Doctor Strange has also fought against him. In fact, if it weren't for Doctor Strange, Dracula may have never been defeated. Doctor Strange not only defeated Dracula, but at the same time also successfully defeated all vampires on Earth. It's true. How did he do this? By possessing the knowledge of and utilizing the Montesi formula. This isn't Strange's only tie to the world of vampires either. Doctor Strange also has a brother who became a vampire, and he has crossed paths with Chthon, who is believed to have been the one to create a few different kinds of supernatural beings, including, you guessed it, vampires. Number 8. Cyttorak. Doctor Strange actually wields the bands of Cyttorak, tying him directly to this villain. But you probably know Cyttorak better for his influence over Juggernaut, the X-Men villain who is the stepbrother of Professor Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. Cain Marko, Charles' stepbrother, was the avatar of Cyttorak for a long time, having come into contact with Cyttorak's gem and gaining immense power, also being made to act as Cyttorak's agent on Earth. Cyttorak himself is a demon and has also been worshipped as a god. He is focused on and symbolizes heavily the concept of destruction, known as the Lord of Oblivion and the Destroyer. He was at his most powerful when he was on Earth, but eventually became banished from Earth and was forced to return to his home dimension known as the Crimson Cosmos. He actually made his first full appearance in Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme issue number 44. I wonder actually, remember how we used to say that Cyclops' eyes are like a portal to a world filled with energy? That was a thing people used to say. I wonder if that was the same world that Cyttorak was from, just because like Crimson Cosmos makes me think of a world that's just pure like red energy. I don't know if that's what it's like in Cyttorak's dimension, but that's a headcanon that's in my mind now, so. Number 7. Kang the Conqueror. Kang the Conqueror is someone most people might underestimate in the world of comics. This is because he kinda has a ridiculous look in terms of his character design, and probably also because he's known for floating around in kinda like an invisible space chair. It's not the easiest look to adapt to a modern setting and have it feel, you know, anything but ridiculous. It just kind of, it's a look. However, Kang is also a time-traveling villain and the master of time. We have seen both Thanos and Kang reveal that each is intimidated at times by the other. And I know some people are probably gonna be like, but Amanda, what about the time Kang was like, I literally have been avoiding you in like every timeline? Well, there's another alternate reality where something different happens, okay? While Thanos might pack more of a physical punch, Kang could also probably just erase Thanos from existence if he really wanted to. And in an alternate reality at least, he has defeated Thanos using his power over time to basically turn him to dust. So that's also happened. Really, it could go either way. I'm very interested to see if there will be any interaction between these characters in the MCU. I know Thanos is gone, but what if he came back? I don't know. Number 6. Death. Not really a villain per se, though some could see her as such. Death is still definitely an antagonist at the very least. She is the embodiment of death, and I would say that Thanos both respects and fears her during his time pining after her. He is afraid of being rejected by her, that's for sure. Thanos has a complex relationship with death, being an agent of death as someone who also happens to be in love with it, and the feminine entity who embodies it. Thanos at one point pleaded with Death to stay with him after she left him in essence at the altar, following their fight in an alternate universe where King Thanos, as he had become, had pretty much destroyed all life in existence for her. But you know, still not good enough, Thanos. You gotta earn it. You gotta destroy all life, not almost all. Number 5. Magus. Adam Warlock and Thanos have been at each other's throats for years in the comics, but with Adam Warlock being a hero, Thanos wouldn't be particularly afraid of him, I'd say. In fact, the two have also teamed up together when they've needed to, so they fought each other, but they've also worked together before, chiefly against the man they are both afraid of, Adam Warlock's evil counterpart, his evil version, Magus, who actually is like the dark side of his soul made manifest. Magus was actually created to be the champion of life, in contrast to Thanos, who is the champion of death, and as such the two have been sworn enemies since Magus's creation. He is meant to oppose Thanos, which he has attempted to do multiple times to varying success. At one point he demonstrated that he was an even match for Thanos when he got his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet, attempting to use it to bend and shape reality to his own whim. Didn't work out in the end, but hey, you know, he tried. Number 4. Dr. Doom. Well, really, God Emperor Doom, but still. Thanos also wasn't really intimidated by this version of Doom, but he should have been. Doom might seem like just a Terran with a big brain and some magic tricks in comparison to Thanos being a cosmic tyrant, but Doom is not to be trifled with, especially when he wields the powers of the Beyonder. Thanos attempted to fight Doom without much fear, and Doom responded by literally obliterating him, turning him to dust and bones with one mighty punch. And you might be wondering if this was some alternate warped Thanos, but no, it wasn't really. This was Thanos of the Black Cabal, who had preserved himself along with his teammates in a life raft so they weren't altered at all during the creation of Doom's battle world in Secret Wars. Now granted, yes, Doom was augmented in terms of his power, but still, if Thanos remembered this moment, I'm sure he'd at least have a bit of fear when facing Doom in the future, because that's pretty wild. Number 3. Rot. Rot was the child of Thanos and Death that came to be after Thanos Thanos died, and in his death, he merged with the entity of death. Rot as such was not really a person or corporeal being, but more of an abstract entity made manifest. Rot's power was so great for death and destruction that Death and Thanos themselves were actually forced to confront it, using their power to rip it asunder, when nothing else seemed to be able to harm it. Number 2, the many-angled ones. What is a fate worse than death for Thanos? How about a fate where life and creation win? Where death is defeated, so all that is left is untamed, uncontrolled, wild life. That is basically what the Cancerverse is. Although it doesn't have the most appealing name, the Cancerverse is actually known as such thanks to the fact that it came into existence after the original Captain Marvel of an alternate world made a deal with the many-angled ones to rid him of his cancer, basically by defeating death. However, without death to keep it in check, life became twisted and corrupted by how rampant it was. And the many-angled ones were also now able to enter that reality, corrupting it further as they were basically eldritch gods. At one point, the Cancerverse plans to take over the whole multiverse, invading various other universes and sitting on the edge of reality, threatening to bleed into other worlds. Fortunately, Thanos returns to life and ends up manipulating Captain Marvel basically into killing him in the Thanos Imperative, with Marvel making an exception to the rule that nothing can die in their universe for Thanos, because he's like, you are so annoying, you gotta go. As such, because this Thanos is actually of Earth 616, his version of death is able to appear in the Cancerverse when he dies and allows it to be defeated basically. But even though this works to get to this point, it takes a lot of courage for Thanos, who is actually afraid of joining in the fight against the Cancerverse initially due to the absence of death in that world, which makes sense. I mean, he's kind of all about death, so I'd be pretty nervous about that too. Number 1, Thane. Thane is Thanos' son, and he definitely feared him because he literally returned to Earth to try and hunt Thane down and destroy him as a result of Thane's potential power surmounting his own. He's afraid that Thane will basically rise up and overtake him and basically end up being a better Thanos, I think. But in the end, this wasn't something that Thanos had to be particularly afraid of, it turned out. Even after Thane became empowered with the Phoenix Force, Thanos still managed to defeat him. And this was also at a point when Thanos himself seemed to be dying at this time in the comics. Thane ended up being stripped of the Phoenix Force and ended up sentenced to suffering a hell-like existence in the God Quarry for the rest of his life. Or, you know, at least until some writer remembers, oh yeah, he's still down in that God Quarry, and decides to get him out of there. Thane was also an Inhuman, and his powers are actually perfect for someone who is known to be Thanos' son. He had a Death Touch ability that, while untamed, could kill anyone within a certain radius, and he could also trap people in a state of living death through encasing them in amber, which sounds actually worse than dying. Number 10, Uranos. While Thanos didn't outwardly appear to be nervous or afraid around his great uncle Uranos in the recent Eternals comic series, or at least in the one-shot issue that sort of tied into Eternals the Heretic, I'm not fully convinced that this was actually true. In fact, I might even think that Thanos was perhaps bluffing. This is because Uranos is known to be even more of a killer than his great nephew. Even if it didn't appear as though Thanos was affected by this knowledge, we already know from other experiences that Thanos does not like to have his purpose undermined in this way. He likes to be the best and greatest agent of death, and Uranos, if not locked up, compete with him for that title. Which likely means that Thanos, if Uranos were fully unleashed, would be afraid and intimidated by him, probably seeking to destroy him eventually. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love this video, if you love when we talk about Thanos, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9, Mephisto. While in Infinity Gauntlet, it seems as though Thanos is actually playing Mephisto for a fool, making him in essence behave like a servant to him. In reality, it kinda seems more likely that Mephisto, in awe of Thanos' power, is actually along for the ride and looking for ways to manipulate him. This wouldn't be the first time Mephisto would do something like this in Thanos' life either. It is also implied in issue number 38 of the current Avengers run that Mephisto actually manipulated Thanos in his past as well, possibly even having a hand in encouraging Kid Thanos to join up with the Masters of Evil and take on the prehistoric Avengers. Also, Mephisto, or the collection of Mephistos, could later make a deal with them. Who knows? close. I personally think while Thanos might not see the threat that Mephisto is as a villain, that Thanos could fear and perhaps in the future will fear him when he realizes just how much Mephisto may have been manipulating him this whole time. After all, it was actually Mephisto in Infinity Gauntlet that kind of first helped plant the idea of Thanos snapping. Seriously, go back and read that issue, you'll see what I'm talking about. Number 8. Ultron. While Thanos may not have seen this coming in the What If Disney Plus streaming animated series episode, if he had, he likely would have been wise enough to have actually been afraid of Ultron. Ultron here is nuts. Here Ultron ends up becoming all-powerful after Thanos arrives on an already decimated Earth, because in this reality Ultron actually won. Thanos, having the rest of the Infinity Stones at this point, does not prove powerful enough to stop this alternate Ultron, who actually kills him just using the Mind Stone alone and takes the rest of the Infinity Stones for himself.
Number 7. Dracula. This might be my vampire-loving bias coming into play, but I think the way Dracula is portrayed in the Marvel Comics is quite scary, and that's coming from someone that's usually more enamored with him than scared by him. Hey, to each their own. So Dracula is a prominent character in the comics, and he's portrayed as, the classic vampire figure. So the classy vampire made his first appearance in Tomb of Dracula in 1972, which was created by writer Marv Wolfman and artist Gene Colan. This comic series, along with many other Marvel horror titles of the era, contributed to the resurgence of interest in horror comics. Now he's based on the classic Bram Stoker depiction of the centuries-old vampire, cursed with immortality and supernatural powers. Like many traditional vampires, Dracula possesses superhuman strength, speed, agility, the ability to hypnotize and control the minds of his victims, transform into a bat or other creatures, and has an aversion to, the usual sunlight, garlic, crosses. He can also regenerate from most injuries, except for those inflicted by wooden stakes, through the heart, or exposure to sunlight. Dracula is often portrayed as the lord and ruler of Earth's vampires, commanding a vast army of followers and seeking to expand his dominion over both the human and vampire worlds. Now Dracula has clashed with numerous Marvel superheroes over the years, and these confrontations often involve battles against his little minions as well. If that isn't scary enough for you, Dracula's curse of immortality is deeply unsettling, since, he can't be killed by any conventional means. As a vampire, Dracula feeds on the life source of the living, and his ability to hypnotize and control the minds of his victims adds quite the psychological dimension to the fear he instills. Hey, loss of free will and autonomy is a terrifying concept. One notable encounter occurred in the storyline Avengers 185 and 86, published in 1979, when Dracula targets the Avengers after becoming obsessed with the Scarlet Witch. And I can't say I blame him for falling in love with her. Granted, his attempt to make her his bride leads to quite the confrontation.
Number 6. Null. Null existed long before even the Celestials in the 6th incarnation of the multiverse, where he existed in basically nothingness. But when the Celestials created the 7th multiverse, Null was mad that he got woken up. So he created the all-black Necro Sword and beheaded a Celestial. For this insane feat of power, he was banished to another void of nothingness, where he improved on the sword and eventually broke out into the universe, taking out various gods until he lost the Necro Sword after being defeated by a mysterious god of light. Null then goes on to make more and more symbiotes. Yes, the symbiotes like Venom and Carnage, who all share a hive mind under the control of Null himself. These symbiotes, who are all terrifying in their own right, eventually rebel and imprison Null inside the symbiote homeworld, Clintar. In the 2020 King in Black story, Null escapes, again, and heads to Earth, where he faces off against literally all the heroes and even some of the villains. He's one of the strongest villains in Marvel Comics. He is immortal, super strong, instantly heals, can create an unlimited amount of symbiotes, some of which who have been incredibly powerful on their own, and he can control them all. The Silver Surfer had to use all the reserves of the Power Cosmic to just temporarily stop Null. Thor, using the Power Cosmic and the Thor Force, was no match for Null at all. Null has awoken, enslaved, and controlled Celestials and even defeated the Sentry, ripping him in half and absorbing the Void, who we just talked about. The only thing that defeated him was Eddie Brock's Venom wielding the Unipower, which is Captain Universe, the protector of the universe, and the opposite to literally everything that Null represents.
Number 5. The Apocalypse Twins. So this duo made their first appearance in issue number 5 of Uncanny Avengers, which was only published in 2013, ergo making them the most recent villains to come into the universe that I'll be discussing today. So they're mutants and the twin descendants of the big supervillain Apocalypse, so yay! Being bad comes pretty honestly to them. Okay, Technically, their real names are Uriel and Iman, and they were initially created by writer Rick Remender and artist Olivier Coipel, but Apocalypse Twins does sound infinitely cooler. So they were raised by Clan Akaba, a cult dedicated to their dear dad, which aimed to bring about the return of the powerful mutant leader. In terms of specific scary powers, Uriel possesses the ability to manipulate and transmute organic matter, including the power to heal and create life, while Iman has time manipulation abilities, allowing her to see into the future and alter the time stream. The duo are skilled manipulators who use their powers and charisma to sway others to their cause, just like, your everyday narcissists. So that's another little tick on the pass list from me. The twins believed that they could save mutant kind by eliminating threats to mutants and humankind alike, and had a twisted vision of a better world and sought to achieve it through drastic means. I hate sounding like a broken record, but jeepers. Look, a perfect world does not exist when created by force. In terms of, the hell they've unleashed specifically on the Avengers, they created a team of the 4 Horsemen of Death to execute their plans and clashed with the Avengers and the X-Men, leading to a major conflict known as the Ragnarok Now storyline. The storylines involving the Apocalypse Twins had lasting repercussions in the Marvel Universe, affecting relationships among mutants and superheroes. Their parentage plays obviously a very significant role in their menacing presence. As the offspring of Apocalypse, one of the most powerful and iconic villains in Marvel history, their genetic lineage implies an inherent potential for immense power and malevolence.
Number 4. Chthon. Chthon stands as one of the most powerful demons in existence in Marvel Comics, and his ancient origins make him comparable to the very archetype of evil itself. He predates even the likes of Mephisto and is often regarded as the closest embodiment of the devil in demonology in Marvel Comics. Chthon and his Ngarai once ruled over Earth until they faced an assault by the angel Lucifer, an event that occurred long before Lucifer's rebellion against heaven and his ascent to rule over hell as the devil. Chthon's influence extends to the very roots of dark supernatural entities, including witches, werewolves, and vampires. He holds dominion over the most potent form of magic, known as chaos magic, the same mystical force harnessed by the Scarlet Witch herself. To put this into perspective, Scarlet Witch has reshaped the whole of reality with just a fraction of Chthon's power. His counterpart, Oshter, is one of the essential components of the Vishanti, which is a triumvirate that actively opposes Chthon and supplies Doctor Strange with his power. In response to Chthon's malevolent dark hold, they created the Book of Vishanti, a beacon of light against the Book of Darkness. Even powerful beings such as Dormammu and Mephisto invoke Chthon's name when casting their most formidable spells. Chthon's presence alone nearly corrupted and permanently incapacitated the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange. Defeating him is an arduous task, and even when achieved, it often results in his banishment back to his personal dimension, the other realm, where he's basically untouchable.
Number 3. Korvac. So Michael Korvac, commonly known as Korvac, first appeared in issue number 3 of Giant-Sized Defenders back in 1975. Created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Jim Starlin, Korvac is quite the complex character with a unique and powerful storyline. He started as an ordinary human computer technician, but underwent a transformation after encountering the Badoon, an alien race. This transformation granted him incredible powers, including, energy manipulation, telekinesis, and matter transmutation, making him pretty near godlike in terms of abilities. Yikes! Korvac possesses nearly limitless powers, including, once again, the ability to manipulate reality itself. He's also not only physically powerful, but incredibly intelligent. Driven by a desire for order and perfection, he embarked on a quest to reshape the universe according to his own vision. While his motives weren't purely evil, the way he pursued them brought him into conflict with the Avengers, ergo how he earned a spot on our list today. One of his most notable storylines, which was the Korvac saga, is a pivotal moment in Marvel Comics history, since it challenged the Avengers on multiple levels, both morally and physically, and had pretty far-reaching consequences. Once again, Korvac's godlike powers, intelligence, and the existential threats he posed to the entire universe made him a pretty memorable villain. His character is a great example of how complexity and moral ambiguity can add depth to a supervillain, making him more than just, a one-dimensional antagonist.
Number 2. Carnage. The red symbiotes always seem to be the worst of the worst, and the one that would be born from Venom himself seems to be the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. When Eddie Brock was briefly detached from the Venom symbiote, he was imprisoned, and his cellmate was none other than Cletus Cassidy, a psychotic killer serving 11 consecutive life sentences in Rikers Island. When Venom showed up and bust Eddie out of prison, it produced its first offspring as a result of Thanos seeking the Infinity Gems out in space. I don't know how those two connect, but that's just what happened. This offspring would be Carnage, and it was left in the cell when Venom and Eddie escaped, bonding with Cletus Cassidy through a wound in his hand. Meaning, the bond they formed was on a blood level, and it would be nearly impossible to break that. Despite that, there have been other characters that have taken on the symbiote. Norman Osborn was a notable one when he became the Red Goblin and was absolutely terrifying. And then I would be silly to not mention that the Grendel Dragon symbiote had part of itself merge with Carnage to create an incredibly terrifying version of the symbiote known as Dark Carnage that absolutely put up a hell of a fight against Venom and others. Now, Carnage is back yet again, and he is reaching a level of power that puts him on the cosmic map as he is constantly upgrading himself with all kinds of tech and magic to be able to face Eddie Brock, who has become the King in Black of the symbiote race.
Number 1. Thanos. Created by writer and artist Jim Starlin, Thanos made his first appearance in Iron Man issue number 55 back in 1973. He's known for his distinctive appearance and is a towering purple-skinned alien with a heavily muscled physique and deep-set glowing eyes. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanos is obsessed with the concept of death and seeks to impress Mistress Death, a personification of death in the Marvel Universe, and visually speaking, I can't blame him for wanting to impress her. To gain her favor, he often engages in grandiose and destructive acts, including seeking to wipe out half of all life in the universe. Thanos possesses a vast array of superhuman abilities, including super strength, durability, and agility, not to mention that he's highly intelligent and a strategic mastermind. Despite being a villain, he exhibits moral complexity and genuinely believes that his actions are necessary for the greater good, even if they involve mass destruction. The level of delusion there might just be what scares me the most. Oh, and tiny thing, Thanos also poses a cosmic level threat to the entire universe, since his plans often involve consequences on a cosmic scale, making him a particularly dangerous foe. Nope.
Number 10, the Fury. Generally depicted as an enemy of Captain Britain and the X-Men, the Fury is a deadly android built by the reality-manipulating psychic Mad Jim Jaspers of the parallel timeline of Earth 238 to destroy all superhumans but himself. Since it's not a living being, it doesn't possess any superpowers. However, it's ridiculously strong, can generate lethal energy blasts, is capable of adapting to any situation, and can regenerate its mechanical body at will. Most of the Fury's enemies on Earth 238 were based on British comic book characters from the 1950s to the 1970s. After succeeding in its mission, the Fury was deactivated until Captain Britain and his elf sidekick Jackdaw were sent to Earth 238 by the Captain's mythic mentor Merlin. The status crew and forces working for the country's oppressive regime reactivate the Fury and send it to kill the hero, and it murdered Jackdaw and then killed Captain Britain. After a little bit, it traveled to Earth 616 and continued killing many of Captain Britain's allies until it was eventually taken down and buried in the cave system of Captain Britain's mansion, where it absorbed the circuitry of the computer and repaired itself. There's a bit more to its story, but hey, I don't want to spoil it all for you guys, so give it a read for yourself, starting with 1982's Marvel Superheroes UK, number 387. Number 9, Sugar Man. One of the most terrifying looking villains on our list today is Sugar Man, the villain with a terrifyingly powerful tongue, size and mass alteration abilities, and highly advanced regeneration ability. Originally, he ran the human work camps in the Pacific Northwest and was a geneticist with a lab around Niagara Falls, where he regularly tormented his captives. Magneto needed a mutant with chrono variant powers, aka time traveling powers, in order to go back in time to restore reality's proper order before Charles Xavier's death, and Ileana Rasputin was revealed to be one of the few around, so Colossus and Generation Next were sent to retrieve her. Sugar Man held up pretty well against them, only almost dying like 3 times. He eventually hitched a ride to the Apocalypse Citadel and was transported from his native Earth of 295 to Earth 616, where he operated with Genosha to help the Magistrates create a mutant captive army that could take over the world. So not only is he scary looking, he is also scary smart. Can't imagine them sticking him into any X-Men movie, let alone an MCU movie anytime soon, so in the meantime, check him out in comic form, starting with his first appearance in 1995's Generation Next, number 2.
Number 8, Prince Zuko. Okay, so while this might not be a comic book character, I still find Zuko of Avatar to have one of the most traumatic and horrifying stories out there, and I also just like Prince Zuko, so I want to talk about it. Not only that, but he's just a great villain because a lot of the reasoning behind who he is also helps to justify what he does, and makes him a better villain because of that. And that makes him a better villain. A great villain in my mind needs to have a motivation that you can actually connect with. Their need to do something that goes against every moral code that they have learned or that society has to feel justified to the point that you may even feel bad for them at times, or even find yourself rooting for them. After all, we aren't born villainous. It's usually a sense of injustice that makes us feel we have no other option but to break the rules, tear down the establishment, and question our own morals in order to get done what we need done. You have to be pushed to the brink to get to the point that you actually shift into a villain in reality, and Zuko definitely was that. A lot of what he does is out of wanting to win back his father's love, and because he is understandably afraid of his father as well. He became a villain as a result of his punishment at the hands of his father, where he was burned in a forced duel against him, and then later exiled as well. Number 7. Carnage. Even before Cletus Kasady was Carnage, he was terrifying, and the villain only has become more terrifying ever since then. Cletus was born into a family with a history of mental health problems, and from a young age it seemed as though there was always something off about him. It's like he was destined to become a villain. He showed all the expectant signs of becoming a psychotic, sociopathic serial killer, and, well, that's just what happened. He was raised by a woman who we can only assume was his grandmother, as his mother died seemingly from childbirth. He was also born in Ravencroft, so I feel like that is some kind of foreboding as to what type of child he could grow up to be. His supposed grandmother mistreated him while raising him, and he paid her back in kind by pushing her down the stairs. Yikes! From there, he went to live with a family who is believed to have been his biological father and his stepmother, though I don't think that's ever really confirmed. That also didn't end well. Roscoe, his apparent dad, mistreated him as well, and his stepmother ended up dead, caught in the middle of the conflict. Roscoe was arrested because of her death, and Cletus ended up at an orphanage. While there, he unleashed his wrath on fellow orphans and administrators, even killing a few outright, and eventually burned the orphanage to the ground. Seriously, this is just something out of a horror movie. Number 6. The Broken. I don't know why, but this villain's tale just always sticks with me for some reason. No matter what, I just think it's that initial panel of Batman's like head and torso together, which is like separated from the rest of his body but suspended with like thick coiled wires, and he's in immense pain, that really does it for me. It just is like, I don't know, I just think it's so scary. The Broken is an alternate version of Batman who comes from the dark multiverse. He appeared in the retelling of Nightfall, where instead of Batman winning the day on his Earth, he lost in the fight to reclaim Gotham against Azrael, who he'd appointed as his replacement after Bane broke his back. Azrael won and became Gotham's protector, Saint Batman, and Bruce became his permanent prisoner. His limbs were removed from his body, but he was kept alive, just as like a head and a torso, kept in immense pain on what I assume is like a life support machine, but also kind of a torture device. He suffered intense migraines and seizures while kept this way. Eventually, he was freed by Bane's son and escaped Saint Batman, taking back Gotham, but this entire experience left him broken, turning him into an even worse villain than Saint Batman was. So he like reclaims the city, but you're like, oh no, oh dear. Not good. Number 5, Superman. Wait a minute, what? Superman isn't a villain. Well, not in the main continuity, but in the alternate reality of Injustice, he most certainly is a villain. How did this come about? Well, after Superman was tricked into fighting Doomsday, only to realize he had been made to hallucinate by the Joker and Harley, who used fear toxin on him. What had actually been happening was that Superman had been fighting Lois Lane, not his nemesis Doomsday. He realizes this all too late, sadly, as he discovers he has killed Lois. Not only that, but she was pregnant. And not only that, but the Joker and Harley had also tied a trigger for a nuclear explosion to Lois's heart. As a result, when her heart stopped, Metropolis, Superman's shining city, was blown to bits. It's really no wonder he became such a cold and deadly villain. He felt that he needed to fix the world as a result of these events. Of course, he went about that in a way that I'm sure Lois would not have been proud of had she still been alive to see Superman fight in her and Metropolis's name. Number 4, Killer Frost. Killer Frost was originally scientist Caitlin Snow, who had been on the hunt for a perpetual motion energy conducting machine that many believed to be a myth. She sought to continue the research of Dr. Louise Lincoln, who had been working to make such a machine, which she called a self-sustaining thermodynamic ultraconductor engine. Caitlin's colleagues warned her against following in Dr. Lincoln's footsteps, but she paid them no mind. When she finished the engine, they turned on her, revealing their true colors. They were actually working for the evil organization known as Hive, and sought to destroy Snow and Lincoln's work, preventing the invention from ever being used or discovered. They trapped Caitlin within the engine and started it up in order to destroy her. Terrified, Caitlin panicked and tore out the wires for the coolant system. This had an unexpected result, and Caitlin Snow found herself bonded with ice and basically became a heat vampire. With her new ice-based powers, she escaped and killed all of the Hive agents. Craving heat as a result of her condition, she would later discover that exposure to Firestorm's powers temporarily reverted her to normal and would dedicate her life to pursuing him, seeking a permanent cure. Number 3. Zombie Spider-Man. I know he's another alternate hero turned villain, but what can I say? They get some of the spookiest origins because they kind of have the most to lose. Heroes have usually higher stakes than villains. When it comes to Spider-Man's origins in the zombieverse, he was of course infected with the zombie virus, which made him a villain. But as this change came upon him, he found himself tragically and horrifyingly feeding on his own family members that he tried desperately for years to keep safe. Spider-Man started off his brain and flesh-eating spree by eating those he'd loved the most in a horrific twist. He devoured Mary Jane and his Aunt May, likely crying all the while, I imagine, but unable to stop himself. He was just so hungry. Number 2. Bane. It's really no surprise that Bane became a supervillain considering he grew up in prison, serving time for crimes he did not commit, but that his father committed. Bane's father was a revolutionary who had escaped the prison, and when Bane was just 17, he was imprisoned in his father's place. He spent most of his life inside a cell that was connected to the ocean. All day he would spend in mind-numbing seclusion, alone in his cell, and at night he would have to swim for his life while trying to stay afloat above the water that filled up his prison cell almost to the very top, but not quite. Crabs and leeches would cling to his body, cutting him throughout each tormented night, and insects who happened to be sharing the cell with him would climb up on his face seeking refuge. Every moment he ever spent outside of his cell afterwards would be focused on becoming stronger and smarter, preparing himself to one day escape the prison and accrue power once outside its walls. Number 1. Magneto. One of the scariest stories out there in terms of supervillain origins is that of Magneto, made more scary by the fact that it's actually based off of real-world circumstances experienced by many victims of the events tied to World War II. Magneto grew up being trapped along with many of his family in a camp by World War II German soldiers. Now, I apologize for not being able to say the words that I would like to say here to give this topic the weight that I think it deserves. I think we all agree. But there are certain words and phrases that we are permitted from speaking on this platform, so I apologize for my lighter turn of phrase here and my potentially perceived levity. I promise I do take this subject very seriously. And if you have problems with the fact that we can't say certain words, I would highly recommend that you contact the platform and let them know your thoughts on that. Because yeah, I think that's important to do. Young Magneto would not only have to suffer in these camps, but he'd also have to watch as one by one his family members attempted to escape and often got so close to being truly free, only to be reined back in and pretty much all end up dead in the end. He was forced into taking care of the bodies and disposing of all who perished at the camp as well, becoming a Sonderkommando, which must have felt like psychological torture as well as being grueling work. Sonderkommandos were actually real-world special units, by the way, that existed during World War II, made up of Jewish prisoners from the camps who were forced into disposing of the victims who had been killed in the camps, threatened with their own deaths if they refused the work. In the end, Magneto did escape, but even then, he was met with tragedy. He and his love Magda would escape and start a family, finding a home in a village in the mountains. But after he was revealed to be a mutant, the people turned on him and his family, burning their home to the ground. As Magneto attempted to save his daughter, who was trapped on the upper floor of their home, soldiers attacked him, preventing him from doing so, and she died in the fire.
Number 10. Speed Freak. Speed Freak is a criminal and an addict who killed an inventor and stole his battle suit in order to become a superpowered addict criminal. His intimidating battle suit helps him to fly as well as create holographic images and features adamantium cutting blades as well as projectile barbs, which have helped him to go toe-to-toe with the Hulk, even managing to slice open the Hulk's stomach at one point. What makes Speed Freak scary is his lack of humanity, working as a killer for hire in order to feed his addiction. He also shows no care for potential collateral damage, once attacking an AIDS benefit concert in order to try and take out one of his targets. Speed Freak was one of the villains killed in the Stamford incident, a fight between a group of villains and the New Warriors, which resulted in huge amounts of collateral damage and directly led to the Superhero Registration Act and the resulting Civil War. Certainly not the scariest villain on this list, but one I wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley nonetheless. Number 9. 9. The Dogs of War. Developed by the United States military for hunting down the Jade Giant, the Dogs of War were 4 ordinary dogs that were fed gamma-infused meat that transformed them into gamma mutates. They were used to track the Hulk's scent and were trained to attack him when they found him, but being rage-fueled Hulk dogs, they attacked both the Hulk and their military handlers. Now, being attacked by a dog is a horrifying experience under the best of circumstances, but dealing with giant canines with super strength and anger issues is even worse. These paralyzing pooches had only one appearance in Incredible Hulk Volume 2, Issue 14, but they made an impact, being adapted on screen in the criminally underrated Hulk film a couple years later.
And at number 8, Sauron. Don't be confused by its name. This is no Middle-earth Sauron, luckily. Sauron of the Marvel Universe is quite different, despite being evil and having taken the name Sauron after the Lord of the Rings villain. Sauron is the alter ego of Carl Lycos, who has a Jekyll and Hyde relationship of sorts with this humanoid pterodactyl form of his. He's essentially an energy vampire who often lives within the prehistoric jungle known as the Savage Land. First appearing in this form in X-Men issue 60 back in 1969, Sauron was initially meant to be a giant bat-like creature. But back in those times, the comics code authority was still in effect, somewhat, and his creators Roy Thomas and Neil Adams inquired with the organization, who suggested that the character's vampiric traits would be in violation of the code. So instead of going with something that resembled a giant vampire bat, which was banned according to the code, they ended up opting out for a form that looked more like a pterodactyl. Anywho, what can Sauron do aside from look absolutely terrifying? Well, he's got all the superhuman fixings: strength, speed, stamina, durability, and intelligence. He flies, duh, has hypnotic eyes, fire breath, razor-sharp claws, and most importantly, he can absorb life forces and mutant powers, and can sense mutants too. In addition to this, he can gain the powers of other mutants. Once, while battling against the Avengers and the X-Men, he was shot in the head by the second Black Widow, but survived thanks to having absorbed Wolverine's healing factor. And at 7, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is most well known in Marvel Comics for being the first foe of Wolverine's, the enemy in which Wolverine and the Hulk take on together. Based on the Wendigo legend of the Algonquin people, it's a large beastly creature with superhuman strength, stamina, durability, and agility. It has enhanced speed, hardened and sharp talons, and a regenerative healing factor. It's found in the woods of northern Canada and is the result of a curse that takes place under very specific conditions, primarily when a human in the forests feed on human flesh. Any of you familiar with the recent video game title Until Dawn may be familiar with the legends, although the Wendigo of Marvel Comics looks quite different than the video game's representation. Now, over the years, the Wendigo has taken on its fair share of mutants, including Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and the members of Alpha Flight. And the Wendigo isn't just one character either. Various different Wendigo have appeared over the years, all formerly humans who partook in cannibalism and have become these wretched creatures. And at 6, Predator X. Predator X first hit the panels of Marvel Comics back in 2007 in New X-Men issue 34. It is a grotesque beast, reptile-like, with superhuman strength and speed, sharp claws and teeth, toxic saliva, accelerated hearing, and its body is covered in non-toxic inorganic mercury. That latter bit means it is highly resistant to physical damage and can draw materials in the environment surrounding it to help reform itself. So why is it scary? If you aren't already kind of freaked out by it? Well, it can track mutants on their genetic signature and is pretty much tireless, meaning it can track its prey relentlessly until it succeeds, wearing down its target for as long as necessary. It can run at speeds of 199 kilometers an hour for a total of 19 hours straight before having to slow down. Luckily, its insides are not as durable as its outsides. Wolverine managed to kill it by tearing it apart from the inside out with his claws. But fun fact, it killed one of the villains that we mentioned on our part 1 list, Peeper, who it devoured on the side of a road. It's vicious to say the least. Predator X was created thanks to Stryker, who, prior to dying, requested that a living weapon be made in order to combat the coming of a mutant Antichrist, aka Hope Summers. Moving on to number 5, Sugar Man. Sugar Man is by no means a good X-Men villain, but he is definitely a terrifying one to take in. First debuting in the Age of Apocalypse timeline, Earth 295, in Generation Next issue 2 in 1995, Sugar Man would manage to sneak his way out of that reality and onto Earth 616, when bombs are blowing the crap out of 295 as a last resort means to be rid of Apocalypse. Sugar Man, aside from being hideous and offensive to the eyes, is an expert biologist and geneticist. He has 4 arms, superhuman strength, razor-sharp teeth and claws, an indefinitely long bioelectric tongue, ew, an enhanced sense of smell, and has the ability to alter his body mass and size, which is actually how he sneaked his way over to 616, by hiding in Colossus's boot, of all places. He's responsible for a handful of deaths on Earth 295, and when he arrives on 616, he ends up forcibly enslaving hundreds of mutants for the magistrates. The reason why he really ends up on this list? Just look at him. From scary looks to scary intentions, moving on to number 4, we have the Reavers. The Reavers are a team of criminal cyborgs who first debuted in Uncanny X-Men issue 229 back in May of 1988, created by Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri. The Reavers, led by a man named Donald Pierce, are dedicated to the destruction of mutants, and specifically the destruction of Wolverine. Initially, they were a gang of looters who operated in Australia, but began to branch out when they used the mutant gateway to teleport across the globe in order to pull off more sophisticated robberies. The X-Men stopped them, with only a handful of the Reavers escaping that first encounter, later reassembling under Pierce, who takes the team into a more militarized direction, using them as an assassination squadron of sorts bent on taking vengeance on the X-Men. They've done some pretty messed up stuff over the years, including capturing Wolverine, torturing him, and crucifying him. They're an extremist team bent on eliminating mutant kind, humans who have become cyborgs as part of the cause. And they've even stirred up trouble in alternate timelines too. In Age of Apocalypse, they were a band of human traitors who served the titular villain, and in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, they are human gladiators who have undergone surgery to become cyborgs, all for the purpose of hunting down mutants on live television. That's messed up. I mean, imagine running into a team of extremists like that who embrace technology in order to wipe out a race. Yeah, they're scary because they're a foe of the X-Men who are a little bit more realistic antagonists compared to some of their other enemies. We also got to see the Reavers make a cinematic debut in Logan, and needless to say, they're pretty darn scary in their live-action adaptation as well. And at 3, the Purifiers. The Purifiers are one step up from the Reavers, and are unsettling for very similar reasons. They're a paramilitary and terrorist organization, also created by Chris Claremont, that debuted in Marvel graphic novel issue 5, X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. And they are led by none other than Reverend William Stryker, who is their founder. So their whole shtick is that they're Christian fundamentalists who believe that they are fighting a holy war against mutants. They see mutants as the children of the devil and therefore need to be exterminated. In their first appearance, they abducted Charles Xavier and several members of the X-Men team, killed mutant children, fought against Magneto, and almost executed Kitty Pryde. Luckily for her, one of Stryker's guards grew horrified with his actions and shot Stryker, resulting in Kitty getting away and Stryker being sent to prison. That wasn't the last of them though. Even after Stryker no longer led the group, other successors took over the leadership mantle, including his own son, Jason Stryker. Later on, the Purifiers got their hands on Warren Worthington III's wings and used blood from them, extracted Apocalypse's techno-organic strain inside of them in order to graft it and then give to the Purifiers, giving them their own wings, a specific subgroup that would be called the Choir, whose whole MO was to, I quote, strike down Satan's spawn with God's own might. Archangel would later massacre all of the Choir minus 3 members. And at number 2, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is one of the most notorious X-Men villains. Sinister, aka Nathaniel Essex, first debuted as the employer of the assassin group the Marauders, mentioned in the Uncanny X-Men issue 212 in 1986, but first seen in the Uncanny X-Men issue 221, almost a whole year later. Not only is his aesthetic unsettling, but he's also capable of some really terrifying stuff. He's telepathic, telekinetic, has superhuman strength, durability, and longevity, can create concussive energy projections, and, potentially scariest of all, can manipulate his body on a molecular level. Born in 1859, he was obsessed with Darwin's theories and was considered an unorthodox biologist, conducting immoral experiments that would make him an outcast amongst his peers. He even dug up his dead firstborn child to experiment on it. After awakening Apocalypse, the villain would painfully transform him into an ageless being, with Essex taking on the name Sinister, which was the last thing that his wife called him on her deathbed. It's a wee bit masochistic, isn't it? And finally, in our number 1 spot, the Phoenix Force. One of the most terrifying foes that the X-Men have ever faced off against is the Phoenix Force, an entity that is an immortal and immutable manifestation of the universal force of life and passion, born of the void between states of being, the nexus of all psionic energy which does, has, and ever will exist within the Marvel multiverse. The Phoenix Force requires a host, and it manifested within Jean Grey, who, when losing control of it, became the Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix has a vast amount of abilities, is able to manipulate matter, energy, and life force, and has cosmic awareness, all of which makes Jean's Dark Phoenix incredibly powerful and threatening. In many cases, in alternate realities, Jean has completely wiped out the planet or consumed the universe when not stopped by the X-Men. And while much of the Phoenix saga has been retconned, along with Jean dying and coming back to life, and then dying and coming back to life again, the Phoenix Force has still proven to be rather deadly regardless. Over the years in the comics, the Phoenix Force has proven capable of taking on powerful foes like the Beyonder, absorbing stars for energy that creates supernovas capable of wiping out entire planets, and even flat out wiping out all of existence in What If issue 27 volume 1. I don't know about you guys, but to me that's scary as hell. And at number 10, Holocaust. I mean, his name enough should have you wary. Holocaust first appeared in 1995's X-Men Alpha, and is one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Holocaust was initially from the Age of Apocalypse timeline, where he was known as Nemesis, where he was said to be one of Apocalypse's children. Magneto would strip Nemesis of his flesh in a battle battle, and raged for the deaths that Nemesis had caused. His body was then retrieved by Apocalypse, who gave him to Dark Beast, who managed to capture his spiritual essence and put it inside a near indestructible crystalline exo-armor, a procedure in which Nemesis became Holocaust, or rather, Holocaust was born. This character is particularly terrifying for one specific reason: his abilities. He initially possessed the power to generate highly destructive bionuclear microwave energy blasts, which can be super destructive. And later on, when he became an energy being, he gained the ability to drain the life force from other beings in order to charge his own exoskeleton that acted as a suit of armor for him. He's pretty much physically invulnerable, or at least he was. The character was killed by Hyperion, who cracked open Holocaust's exoskeleton and then absorbed all of his bioenergy into himself by literally inhaling him. So that's a fun way to go. And at number 9, Krakoa. Krakoa is one of the X-Men's earliest villains, having appeared in Giant Size X-Men issue 1 in 1975. There's been 2 versions of Krakoa over the years, with the first being the villainous one. It appeared initially as a small island in the Pacific Ocean that was located near a nuclear bombing test site. The radiation from that test site mutated the island's ecosystem, which altered the island into a hive mind entity in 1945, something that Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos witnessed. They encountered much of the island's intelligence and established a peaceful treaty in exchange for keeping the island's existence a complete secret. Now flash forward to 1975. Krakoa decides it's hungry and it wants to feed on the life force of mutants, because I guess mutants are tastier than humans. It kills a young mutant team and later captures the original iteration of X-Men. This is what causes Professor Xavier to create the second wave of X-Men, the team that consists of Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Thunderbird, Sunfire, and Banshee, all to save the first iteration. Polaris eventually launches Krakoa into outer space, and later it becomes captured by the Stranger. Now this Krakoa is perhaps one of the most physically intimidating entities that the mutant team has ever fought. It is a literal monstrous island. The second version of it though, in case you're wondering, is much more benevolent, having been grown by a member of the Hellfire Club but wanting to redeem itself with the X-Men and become one of them. It ends up becoming a part of the school and even helps the X-Men financially by growing diamonds on a tree that it produces. Man, imagine having a friend who could grow diamonds on trees for you. It's the dream.
Number 8. Arcade. Arcade first appeared in Marvel Team Up Volume 1, number 65 back in 1978. Now Arcade has no powers, but you don't need them to be a scary or a credible threat. Arcade has a genius level intellect and a penchant for murder that has led him down the path to be a hitman. But he doesn't just kill people. No, he makes them work their way through elaborate arenas of his own design in his amusement park inspired murder world. Arcade never seems to have a hard time kidnapping people either. You're living your life one minute, next, boom, you're in murder world. While Arcade has gone up against many Marvel heroes, he has had many notable encounters with the X-Men. When possible, he likes to get people in pairs to make more interesting, like Gambit and Wolverine. The rooms will be designed with a myriad of traps and dangers to test the specific occupant's skill set and mental fortitude. Now, some may be like, scary, but you may change your tune if you woke up kidnapped in Murder World. Number 7. David Moreau. David Moreau is yet another normal human, but is on here for the effect he has had on the X-Men verse. Moreau is also known by the name the G-Engineer. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 236 back in 1988, and was allied with the island of Genosha, a land whose prosperity had been built on the backs of mutant slavery, which had been made possible thanks to Moreau's invention of a mind control device. He also invented the mutate process, wherein 13-year-olds were tested for the X gene, and if it was found, they were turned into mutates, with their memories erased and rendered completely obedient. Now, Moreau can't get all the villain cred here. His mission was helped along by tech given to him by a villain who was in part 2, the Sugar Man. The Sugar Man had obtained a version of this tech from his reality, that being the Age of Apocalypse, and that version of Mr. Sinister. Still horrifying stuff, and a threat to not just the X-Men, but mutants everywhere. Number 6. Nimrod. Don't let the name fool you. Nimrod is a force to be reckoned with. First appearing in 1985 in Uncanny X-Men number 191. Nimrod comes from the now famous Days of Future Past storyline, a descendant of the robotic hunting machines, the Sentinels. His name is actually a biblical one that means mighty hunter. The fact that it translates to a playground insult years later, that's not his fault. Nimrod was created by the Sentinels to be the ultimate mutant hunting weapon, and he is nigh invulnerable. After some time travel, he decides that he doesn't need to eliminate all mutants, just the X-Men, powerful ones who are outlaws, who have an impact on the timeline. It's very Terminator-esque, and that's terrifying. That scene in the first Terminator where it's coming down the hall towards them dragging its foot and it seems slow, but then it pans out and you see how fast it's really moving, that still messes me up. That scene and the sound of it dragging its foot, just the... Number 5. Archangel. Warren Warren Worthington III gets to be so high up because of just what an impact his villainous turn made on X-Men history, and it's a great storyline. Warren was one of the original X-Men, a founding member from all the way back in X-Men #1 in 1963. Warren always had a complicated relationship with his mutation, the wings of an angel, or at least it seems that way now. At first he was a stereotypical air character, then he got broody when things got angsty in the 80s. Warren's descent towards villainy began with X-Factor, a group Warren was backing, which ends up getting viewed as mutant hunters for hire, and after he is exposed as the backer, his wings are mutilated and develop gangrene, leading to them needing to be amputated. Warren is devastated and commandeers a jet that has been sabotaged to blow up. He doesn't know that. Before it does, he is transported away by Apocalypse, who offers him a spot as a horseman. Apocalypse performs extensive genetic alterations that change Warren's appearance and give him metallic wings, and for a time, he was the Horseman Death. Manipulated by Apocalypse, he turns harshly on his friends. As Archangel, he was a force to be reckoned with, and his path towards redemption and occasional slips back make for good reading. The design is great, those sharp metallic wings, and again, he's someone who knows the team's weaknesses. He is good currently, which, well, bleh. Give me back my Archangel. Number 4, Mastermind. We're talking about the first villain to have that name, who was instrumental in the Phoenix arc. This character first debuted in 1964 in X-Men #4, and for our purposes, we need Jason Wingard. Mastermind has the power to cast illusions, vivid and realistic ones, that he uses to manipulate people to his whims. He can also alter people's senses, how they feel, what they see, and most importantly, how they perceive him. He likes to up his handsomeness game. What makes him so formidable is that he can even affect powerful telepaths, such as Xavier and most notably Jean Grey. This occurred during his association with the Hellfire Club. He at first uses his powers to pose as Nikos and initiate a romance with the help of Emma Frost. He is then able to convince Jean that it was Victorian times and they were married, and that she was the Black Queen. Mastermind doesn't make it, but his legacy lives on, as does his creepy mind manipulation plot. Scary, to be made to think you live in a bodice ripper. Mental manipulation is scary stuff. Number 3, Strife. Okay, so some explanations, but the Cliff Notes version. Strife is a clone of Cable, who first appeared in 1990 in New Mutants #86. Strife was raised by Apocalypse in the future for the purposes of being a host body. However, Apocalypse decides against it once he realizes that Strife is a clone, as he thought he had the real Cable, but he was wrong. Strife's contribution to this list is the Legacy virus, which was first Legacy 1, then Legacy 2, but would eventually mutate into Legacy 3. The virus was set to target mutants when their X gene was activated, which would ultimately cause the body to stop being able to produce healthy cells and lead to death. But before the end, the victim's powers would go haywire, causing much damage to those around them. Strife took his time perfecting this virus, that's why there's multiple versions, except for 3, which was a mutated version that could infect everybody. Number 2, Cassandra Nova. This is a more recent character appearing in 2001 during the new X-Men #21, as an antagonist to the X-Men and Charles Xavier specifically. So bear with me, because it's gonna get a little zany. Cassandra Nova is Charles Xavier's twin, sorta. But she was conceived without a body, and copied one from Charles in the womb. However, Charles sensed her terrifying thoughts, again in the womb, so he strangled her, and she was stillborn, but her essence survived. Eventually, she was able to build an all-new body. She is Charles's opposite, a dark mirror. Her first act to announce herself to the X-Men was to kill 16 million mutants on Genosha in a mass mutant genocide. As a Mumadrai, Nova was meant to have to wrestle with Charles for control of his body, but thanks to his mutant abilities and hence hers, she could build her own. She has psychic powers compared to Charles, plus telekinesis, phasing ability, the ability to create psionic armor and block attacks, and a hate-on for the X-Men. It's just a lot. And number 1. You guys have been waiting for it. You're excited. It's Proteus. Proteus debuted in 1979 in Uncanny X-Men #125. Proteus was meant to be one of the strongest mutants ever conceived. Born as Kevin McTaggart, he is the son of longtime X-Men ally Moira McTaggart. However, Kevin's powers are so intense they cause him to crave energy to replace what he has expended. In fact, he's actually made of pure energy. His mother had to keep him in containment to protect him and others, but he eventually escaped and put his powers to use, which includes body possession, so he can hop from host to host. He also has psionic energy composition and reality warping abilities that he can actually control. Before he was known as Proteus, he was known simply as Mutant X. So because of the fact that he exists in a pure energy state, the bodies that he hops into, he uses them up pretty quickly, and Proteus normally just burns them out. He could leave before he kills them, but he just doesn't. He also has access to all their memories even after he's left, and has hopped into some of the X-Men's bodies. He's been known to melt buildings, reverse gravity, stretch people into liquid, and more. Basically whatever he can imagine, he can do. He eventually became able to possess multiple individuals at the same time and travel interdimensionally. He's even attempted to bring the astral plane into normal reality. His powers are out of control. The fact that they defeat him at all is a minor miracle each time. Proteus is terrifying in the scope of his power and the fact that really you can't get rid of him.